My selfish brother landed himself in the hospital and ruined our vacation plans, but he doesn't care at all even though I do everything for him. I have always loved my brother, even though he's selfish. Growing up as the older sibling in a single-parent home, we have always been taught to take care of each other since we only had each other. Recently, I've been getting a little annoyed at his self-centeredness. Last year, there were several short overseas trips that Mom and I prepared everything for, and my brother tagged along passively. We had to beg and fight over work leave dates with him for these trips, and even pack his luggage for him. In contrast, trips with his friends were a breeze. We had planned a longer holiday for December, in part to celebrate my promotion, and because we could finally afford such a family trip to Europe. In the months of planning, it has always been my mom and I doing the research. I'm the one funding the trip as well. For my brother's part, we just stressed to him to please take all health precautions such as wearing masks, reducing gatherings with friends if he could, as the virus was still spreading around. This was met with derision and sarcasm, and I gave up nagging uselessly. I told him I just hope nothing will happen, and he aggressively asked, "My effing God, why are you so paranoid?" And continued doing what he wanted. Turns out, we weren't paranoid. 2 weeks before our flight, he got the virus, and a day before our flight, he was hospitalized for the virus-related complication. I rushed down to the emergency room with my mom, and waited for 6 hours while he was kept under observation. We had to stay there for another day. All we knew was that he definitely had to stay in the ICU for at least 2 days, and in hospital for at least a week. I was already canceling the flights and hotel reservations. At this point, I was still more worried than pissed because him getting sick was more important than missing a trip. My brother sensed my mood the second I saw him, but I was waiting until he got discharged before scolding him for being careless. But something happened that made me shut down. His boss came to visit him, and while I was in the room, he asked my brother, "Was there nobody accompanying you to the hospital?" He said no. I was floored. I had to clarify that we rushed down to the hospital from home as he went to see the GP first on his own. He insisted despite Mom asking to follow, and only after we nagged at him for 3 days to please see the doctor for his chest pain. Then, his boss asked him about another trip he was supposed to go on, and he said he was still going to that. My brother scheduled a trip with his friend right after our family trip. This was after Mom and I told him to stay here and cancel it just in case, as it was too soon and we didn't even know when he'd get discharged. Suddenly, something in me just broke. I realized I was bending over backwards for someone who didn't seem to appreciate what his mom and brother did for him. He effed up his health and put his aging mother at risk. This was all preventable if he just listened to his family, especially his mother, who went every day to visit him, maxing out the visiting hours, and cried every night because it was something totally unknown. I will not be visiting him for the next few days, as I don't want to see him or lose my composure. I will not be arranging any more trips with him, only with Mom, who is my world. My mom told me not to be selfish, but it's time I put myself first.
What did someone do to make you hate them instantly? There was this woman at an old job I had. Now she wasn't the greatest, but I never really hated her. She was the type to bully people verbally in the workplace with rumors and snide comments. She once brought a coworker to tears. She'd try to boss people around despite not have any position to do so. She wasn't a manager, same level as everyone else. She seemed to have a chip on her shoulder towards our manager more so than anyone else on the department. A young relative of our manager got terminally ill. A local charity was set up in shop to raise money to send her for treatment as it was her only chance. We all chipped in and encouraged others to do the same until one day all the charity boxes disappeared. Turns out this woman had made an accusation to head office that it was all fake, that the money was just being pocketed by the manager. So to save any legal issues, the company just stopped allowing the money to be raised on the property. They never reached their goal. The manager's relative was only 12. She never got to see another birthday. That's when I hated this woman, and I'll hate her until I can't hate anymore. What made you quit a job on the spot? Worked for a privately owned bakery for exactly 1 week. The owner's son comes in, walks past the counter and into the bathroom. He comes out a few minutes later without acknowledging me or my co-worker, gets into his car and drives away. We both looked at each other, then opened the door only to find this guy literally shit all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. I called the owner, told her what happened, and she said to deal with it. So I asked my coworker if she wanted to clean it up because I wasn't going to. She declined and I told her I was walking out. She did as well. We locked up the store and told the owner we quit but would reconsider staying if her son came back to clean up his own mess. She yelled and berated us for 20 seconds before I said goodbye.
Are wives more disappointed in marriage than husbands? Yes. Nearly 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Over 50% of divorced wives say they never wish to marry again, while it's only 25% for men. Statistics also show that married men live longer, healthier lives. The opposite is true for married women. Marriage is a lot harder on women because they carry the brunt of housework, child care, taking care of the husband and managing a career. Very few men do step up and help with all this and make sure the wife is taken care of too. She's expected to cook, clean, serve, and be the main caretaker of home, husband and children, plus she works in many cases. But nobody asks who is taking care of her. Even if the man is the main provider, that alone doesn't cut it. Taking care of someone is more than just paying bills and giving them shopping money. Can you cook a meal and serve her sometimes? Can you give her some time to go see her friends while you take care of the home/kids? It seems only men are allowed to have a social life, but it's just as important for women. In marriage, women are expected to sacrifice a lot more. They lose their family, friends, their time is no longer their own, their social life gets cut, their career ambitions stifled. Men don't face this. In fact, they get a free housekeeper, cook, maid, access to regular SAGs and someone to produce their children to carry their name. Men don't have to go through anything much. Once they work, they're good. Women are expected to do everything else. My girlfriend became a pro-Trump born-again Christian, so I broke up with her. I know I did the right thing by leaving, but I'm still feeling so blindsided and heartbroken by the way everything panned out. I am 28 years old, and I was with my most recent ex for almost 3 years. I thought she would be the woman I would marry, and for the majority of our relationship, she was my ideal partner. We met when we were both about to graduate from the same university, and I fell for her instantly. Her name was Kara, and before all this happened, she was the most thoughtful, kind person I knew, but all that's changed now. We had been dating for about 2.5 years when I got a call at work from Kara's parents letting me know she had been in a bad car accident, but she had survived. It was one of the scariest moments of my life, and before they told me she was alright, I thought the worst had happened to her. When I got to the hospital, Kara gave me a weak smile from her hospital bed where she was hooked up to a bunch of tubes. She looked okay other than a couple of bruises and scratches, but the doctor said she had sustained a fair amount of internal bleeding and she needed to stay at the hospital for a couple of days while they got it under control. I used all my PTO at work so I could stay by Kara's side the entire time she was there, but unfortunately, her parents also stayed. For context, Kara's parents are typical hyper-religious, pro-Trump Southerners, and we never really got along because of how vocal they are about their hateful beliefs. Kara's mom would literally just read her Bible verses all day to the point where I could barely speak to Kara when she was awake. Anytime she was awake, and her dad was around, he would just go on and on about how she needed to thank God for sparing her. By the time she left the hospital, I had more than enough of them. I had known Kara's parents were like this before she went into the hospital, but Kara had always said she never really found any meaning in her family's religion, and she wasn't religious herself. Well, I guess her near-death experience changed that, or maybe it was her parents' influence on her while she was recovering, but after Kara had been home for about a week, she told me she needed to confess something to me. She had such a serious look on her face, and I noticed she had a brand new Bible in her hands as she spoke to me. She said that she had seen the light when the car first hit her, and Jesus had chosen to spare her, and now she needed to devote her life to his in return. I asked her if she was serious, and she just quoted the Bible to me and nodded her head. She said she needed to devote her life to God, and she hoped I would support her and stick by her side. I was a little taken aback by all this, and even though I had never seen her act like this, I tried my best to be supportive in the beginning. But I had no idea how much Kara was about to change everything in her life. She started out by throwing away, not donating, but literally throwing away her entire closet and replacing it with conservative, old lady clothing. Then she started going to church multiple times a week and spending basically all her free time there volunteering and attending services. I felt like I barely saw her anymore. When I did see her, I would try to plan dates just as I always had, but the only thing she wanted to talk about anymore was God and His love and how she wanted me to find the light. She was constantly asking to pray for me, and I guess she had no idea just how much she was using up my patience. She had even started watching Fox News like her parents and complaining about the woke left and their deviance from God's will. It all boiled over one day when Kara came home from work and found me crying in my bedroom. I had just got off the phone with one of my siblings, and they had told me that my aunt, whom I had been very close with, had just lost her battle with cancer. I was heartbroken, and I knew everyone in my family was hurting. My girlfriend sat next to me and put her arm around me, but when I told her what happened, without missing a beat, she said, "Well, that was God's plan, and who are you to question His will?" That was the last straw for me. I jumped up and told her not everything was about effing God, and sometimes things were just SHT in life. I told her I missed the old her, and I felt like I was living with a stranger ever since she got home from the hospital. She told me I sounded like a sinner, and I just hated her for waking the righteous path. I saw that the person I once loved was gone, and that I was basically talking to a walking Bible instead of a real person anymore. I told her we were finished, and she started curing me out using less than holy words. It was a messy breakup, and she tried to tell all of our mutual friends that I left her because I hated God. Sure, F it, whatever, I hate God, and I hate her for what she let herself turn into.
My mother-in-law wants to share my husband and I's bed when she comes to visit. My mother-in-law has always been really weird towards my husband. Whenever she's around, she's constantly touching him. Whenever she comes to visit, she spends the entire time holding my husband's hand and stroking his hair, and I have even seen her sit on his lap here and there. I never really brought up how weird I found her behavior towards my husband, since I'm not very close with my own mom and I figured maybe their relationship was more normal than it looked. But recently, she's gone way too far, and I wished I hadn't let all her past behaviors slip until now. My husband has never mentioned his mom being overbearing or overly touchy, so I was nervous to ever have to bring it up. My husband and I moved into our new house about 2 months ago. It's far from our hometown, and my mother-in-law had a full-on panic attack when she found out we were moving far away from her. I listened to my husband reassure her again and again that she could visit and we would come to visit her often. Secretly, it was making my stomach turn to hear all this. I was happy to get distance from her since she has always been so involved in our lives. I wanted to start my husband and I's family in a fresh new area and not have his mom around every day. When we still lived in the same town as her, she would come over literally every single day. I'm not even exaggerating. My husband gave her a key to our old place without asking me, and she was in our house all the time. She even caught up being intimate once, and the next day she had the nerve to ask me to please act more ladylike. Lady, I live here, not you. She was already giving us so much grief for moving away, but her latest request is my last goddamn straw. I've officially had it with my mother-in-law to the point where I'm considering making my husband choose if he wants me or her in his life. My mother-in-law invited herself to come visit us the week we moved into our house, and my husband accepted without mentioning a word to me. He told me she was coming the day of, and I told him I was getting tired of him always putting his mother ahead of our marriage. He said that he was just trying to be a good son and that he loved his mom. I asked if he loved me too, and he just kissed the top of my head and hugged me to end the conversation. When his mom arrived that night, I saw that she had put her overnight bag in the master bedroom, where me and my husband slept. I told her I had set up the guest bedroom for her, and I tried to pick up her things to carry them in there. To my absolute shock, she just giggled and took her things out of my hands. She looked me in the eyes and said, "That's all right, I'm gonna be sleeping in here right next to my baby." Talking about my husband, of course. I couldn't believe she was really suggesting that she would sleep next to my husband in our bed. I hadn't wanted her to visit so soon in the first place, and now she wanted to share my bed? Instead of arguing with her, I talked to my husband in private and told him I was obviously uncomfortable with that and that it was time to set some much-needed boundaries with his mom. I wanted to cry tears of anger when instead, my husband said she would only be here for a couple of days and that we should let her share our bed since she was still adjusting to all this. I'm fuming. All this has made me realize that I married a full-on mama's boy who will always pick his creepy mom over me. I am not sleeping in bed with that woman. I decided to leave the night and I've been taking some time away from my husband while I reevaluate this marriage. He can stay there with mommy dearest since he seems to see her as the love of his life.
My narcissistic stepdad kicked me out for refusing to break up with my amazing girlfriend. Now that I'm gone, he's begging for my forgiveness. My stepdad is a toxic, selfish, and manipulative person who has caused me many traumatic incidents in the past. We always butted heads for a bit, even before this big incident, and this is my third time getting kicked out of home in the past 4 years, but this one seems to be as serious. Last night, my parents wanted me to break up with my girlfriend because they believe that she is not good for me and she is bringing me down. They wanted me to just end it and cut it off, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be with her because our relationship is healthy, we are similar people who have similar interests, and we do what we like to do. They didn't like that and thought that she turned me into a liar, a bad person who will forever be lazy and average, and who changed after meeting her. I personally don't think I've changed for the worse but for the better, as she helped me realize so much about myself. For the past couple of years, I've always had to lie about myself in order to keep up an image to keep my parents off my back. My interests that I really like have always been hidden, and I've even had to hide what I am doing with her because they don't like her at all. They figured out that I picked her up to go at brunch with some friends. She lives 2 hours away and they don't like me going over there because they think it's a dangerous place to be in. When I got home that night, they already knew what happened, but still questioned me about things. They started asking me where I was, and when I told them, my stepdad went ballistic. He took my keys, watch, phone, and told me I had 15 minutes to pack up my stuff and leave. I went downstairs to pack, and during that time, he took my phone and called my girlfriend saying some hurtful crap, telling her to stay away from me and that she's no good. I didn't realize this until last night when my girlfriend told me over the phone that he did that. I only knew that he then pretended to be me by saying, "I just got kicked out. Can I stay with you? Hello?" To get a response from her. She figured it out it wasn't him based on the way he was typing, and offered some texts back just to be sure. He used this against me, saying if she really cared, she would have been blowing up my phone and asking if I was okay. She had one of our friends call my phone again and I was able to barely respond because my stepdad let me respond back to her. He took back my phone and then asked if we could call my girlfriend to ask her what she thinks about me. I said that that's my business and that this doesn't apply to him. He kicked me out and I left, but not before he drove down the street I was on to get my mother because he wanted her to leave with me. He always uses her as leverage with me to get rid of me, because he knows that if I go, she goes because I'm her son and she wants to take care of me. I was lectured for 2 hours about why I should not be with my girlfriend, and he started comparing my situation to other family members, saying that I'm going to end up pregnant or in bad relationship situations just like them. I went to bed later because it was late at night. He gave me my phone back the next day and I secretly contacted my girlfriend to let her know what's going on. She told me about what my stepdad did to her the day before, and how he called her names, cursed her out, and told her to stay away from me. She was shaking and panicking but didn't know what to do, so she told her dad and friends about the situation. She also told me how my situation has been normalized and how I was used to this whole getting kicked out thing. That's when I realized that she was right, and I did think that this was too normal. She offered to let me stay with her mom in a different state, which isn't too far from where I am now. Before our talk, I had another friend tell me that I should leave too, as my family is extremely toxic and manipulative. My stepdad kept coming downstairs telling me to just end the relationship with her. He went back upstairs and told me to hand back the phone to him in a minute. I texted her that I wanted to leave, and contacted her mom, saying that I won't have my phone for much longer. I went upstairs and had to give the phone to him. He asked me if I was going to stay with her or break up with her. I said I wanted to stay with her because I didn't like how I was being forced to choose my relationship over them. He said that I would be leaving by 6 p.m. later that day, and I had to give my phone and laptop to them. I had no choice because if I didn't it would have gotten violent as I had been choked by my stepdad before, when I was defending my mother. Speaking of my mother, She felt offended and betrayed that I was choosing my girlfriend over family, and wanted me out immediately. I walked to the police station and was only looking to borrow a phone, but they asked what happened, so I told them everything. They said I wasn't legally able to get kicked out because I had been a resident at the house for over 30 days. So, they took my back and told my stepdad that he could get arrested for this, to which he smiled and said he didn't mind. The police said that this situation wasn't right and let me get my things before we left, and one of them paid for my hotel. This morning I woke up to a bunch of missed calls and messages from my parents, asking me if I'm okay and that they love me. My stepdad mentions that we need to talk about my mother's health, and not anything else. My mom asked if I wanted her to come and get me, and said she just wanted me safe and at home. A part of me feels guilty because my mom is getting sick with a whole bunch of headaches daily and is on medication. I feel like I am adding to her stress, but at the same time, I think I have to take care of myself first. I still plan on leaving for my girlfriend's mom's house. I skipped my best friend's wedding to go to an Owl City concert. I skipped my best friend's wedding to go to Owl City's LA 2011. For context, my best friend asked me to be his best man on his wedding day. I accepted the offer, but there was a fatal flaw. His wedding landed on the same day as Owl City's mega concert, my favorite artist, and I didn't know how to say it to him that I couldn't be his best man anymore. I was hesitant to even tell him, so I never did. I ended up attending the concert instead of his wedding, and I even went backstage to meet Owl City, so in my opinion this was better than attending some boring wedding. I don't know what the big deal is and why people are telling me that going to my best friend's wedding as best man was more important and that I'm a bad person for not telling him that I wasn't going to be there on his big day. I know I'm a piece of SHT and stuff, but it was so worth it. I talked to him 2 days after his wedding. I ghosted him to avoid guilt and we ended up never talking ever since that fateful day. I am just posting for advice. I know it was 12 years ago, but I was thinking about reconnecting. I was talking to his mother, 82F, the other day and she was feeling melancholy towards me. I am asking for advice if I should reconnect with him or not.
I'm planning to ask my stepdad to walk me down the aisle over my real dad. When I was 4 years old, my dad cheated on my mom with his now wife. My mom divorced him and got split custody. I hated going to my father's house because I didn't want his wife to tell me what to do. My dad reduced his time when he got married. I was 6 at that time and wasn't even invited to his wedding, but his stepkids were. His excuse was that I am still bitter and will ruin the ceremony. Over time, he refused to pay child support and I was completely neglected. His excuse was since I couldn't be nice to his wife, he didn't have to be nice to me. When my dad had my half-brother, he was busy with him and ignored me. He even stopped taking me to his house for the weekends. He would ignore me. He would tell me that he wouldn't talk to me unless I act like a good child, aka call my stepmom mom rather than her name. He would make excuses not to take me to ice cream or do any activities. There was a time when I graduated elementary school and he promised that he and I would go fishing. He ghosted me and told my mom there was an emergency. I was again abandoned. By that time my mom started dating my stepdad, Lenny. Lenny was the father I never had. He was a single dad, but he still treated me like his own child. He taught me how to swim, how to drive my car, he attended all the school functions I was in. He was there every time my dad abandoned me. I went very low contact with my dad, only contacting him on Christmas out of obligation. I didn't even call him on Father's Day. So fast forward to now, I am getting married and I have asked Lenny to walk me down the aisle because he is the only dad I have ever known. My dad and his family will be coming as a guest. This infuriated my dad. He told me I am his only daughter, so I shouldn't keep him away from his rights as a father. I am getting calls from his side of the family too. My father is upset and I am sidelining him. According to him, he has been a great father and I am being unfair to him. Also, he doesn't want Lenny to walk me down the aisle at all. I told my dad he can walk his stepdaughter on the aisle and he will only be a guest. I have made my decision. He called an a-hole and told me I was an ungrateful brat. Without him I wouldn't be alive. I'm planning to ask my stepdad to walk me down the aisle over my real dad. I got married 2 days ago. I had texted my dad to say that I am not changing my decision. If he wants to come to my wedding he can, because I am not going to force him. That didn't work. He called my mom and asked to talk to me about this situation. I was hoping he would drop this, but no. He had to act as an entitled parent. I wrote him a long message because I did not want to talk to him without getting interrupted. I told him that give me one good reason that I should let him walk me down the aisle when he has never been a dad in my life. He never cared enough to make his marriage work with mom and decided to betray her and our family. Despite all of that, I still loved him, but every time he left me and abandoned me. I doubt he even knows anything about me because Lenny raised me. He is just some guy with whom I share DNA. He is nothing like my dad because he missed all the big events in my life. He never cared or even tried to be there for me, yet he has the audacity to call me his daughter. Since he didn't do his fatherly duties, I don't think I should do any daughter duties towards him. How can he possibly think he could give me away when he already gave me away 20 years ago? Few minutes go by and then he calls me and asks if this is what I have thought about him my entire life. I asked him where he was when I was graduating. Where was he when I won first prize in my dancing competition? Where was he when I needed someone to guide me? I dare him to tell me one thing about me. How much does he know about me? When was the last time he initiated any conversations with me? He went silent. He asked me if I was still mad about the past. I told him the past was the reason I know he is an unreliable man. All these years, if he has taught me anything, it is that he is a crappy father and someone like him cannot be trusted. I made the biggest mistake of my life believing he would come through. I will not push him to come to my wedding as that is his choice. Later I got a message from my stepmom that what I said has broken my father. I told her, well, if he was upset by the truth then he shouldn't have asked and pushed my buttons. He has ignored me all my childhood. He doesn't get to play the dad now. My wedding went smoothly and the majority of my father's side of the family bailed. It hurts getting betrayed by my own dad, but I am okay. My kids will know Lenny as their grandfather. Edit, I am pregnant. My mom and stepdad have been really happy alongside me. I was non-contact with my dad after the wedding. However, my mother told me he wanted to contact me again. My mom didn't give me his number or any contact information. I guess he heard about my pregnancy and wanted to contact me. I haven't heard from him but heard from my aunts that he has been devastated since the wedding. He wanted to come to my wedding but he wasn't sure if I wanted him there. I mean, even if he is not walking me down the aisle I still wanted him at my wedding. They have been pushing me to talk to my dad and at least hear him out. He has been pining over the fact that he will not get to see his first grandchild. He is very upset and cries all the time. My stepmom also called me from a different number to persuade me to talk to him. She says I am breaking their family by being petty and I should just let it go. My father is sorry for everything. Well, I responded in a very mean manner which I sort of regret. I told her, you mean like you broke my family 20 years ago by sleeping with my father? She says I am being bitter about things that happened 20 years ago. It wasn't just 20 years ago, it was 20 years of neglect and countless therapy sessions. Some wounds just don't heal, they are so severe that you have to amputate that part of you forever. My father has other biological children since he was there for them all the time, maybe he should seek them out to give him grandchildren and not the forgotten daughter he threw away because he prioritized his PP over her.
What did your parents say to you as a kid that still affects you today? My mom had me at 13 because she was assaulted by her dad and she lived in an area where abortion was greatly discouraged. Lived with her grandma and my grandma. She tried her best to raise me but she was just too young to do anything significant. I remember with great remorse that she always worked 2 jobs to try and support me. My mom was a saint, she treated me like the most precious thing of her life. I was very good academically compared to my peers, though I didn't realize how much it made my mom happy that time. This was during my high school. I wanted to make my mama happy, that's all I cared for that time. She used to watch me study late nights till 2 in the morning though I had school on 9 a.m. She told me, promise me that you will stay strong. You wake up every morning to fight the demons that left you so tired the night before, and that my love is bravery, though I didn't understand what was her thoughts that time. I told her not to worry about anything and go to sleep. She was never abusive or strict towards me, she would often spoil me rotten. She loved me a lot and I loved her. My grandma died when I was pretty young and eventually we were on our own and it put a lot of stress on my mom. She was depressed and tired, nothing had gone right in her life. She had no education or pension. She wasn't able to find husband because her situation was really undesirable and she worked 6 days a week and just didn't have time or energy to socialize. She didn't have any friends and I was all she ever had, but she never took it out on me. Always she would find a way to make me happy. I remember one Christmas in particular she bought me a laptop, and to do that she had to work overtime and skip meals half time. She was dangerously skinny that time. After I graduated college and moved out, she took her life. She said in her sewer slide note that she loved me more than anything and she would miss me, but now I was a man of my own life. Tears rolled down my face. I was devastated. She couldn't live anymore. She didn't have a reason to live anymore because she hated her life, but she loved me. Rest in peace, Mom. I now can admit that I had feelings for my mother. I just couldn't help it as we were practically the same age and I hate myself for it. But I can't control my heart, so as they say, a man should follow their heart, and that's what I did. With tears rolling down my cheeks I drove to her grave with a shovel. I attempted to dig her out as I had to at least get one last glance and give her a kiss. I managed to get to the end only to realize that there was no body. I was 6 feet deep in at this point and I looked up only to see my mother looking down at me, holding my diary where I would express my dirty thoughts about her. Today I messed up when I asked my parents for permission to bang in my room. A couple of months ago I, 18 male, asked my parents if I was allowed to have intimacy in my room. My girlfriend and I usually made love in the woods, but it became too uncomfortable and unsafe, so I decided to embrace the embarrassment of asking my mom and dad for permission to sleep with my girlfriend in my bed. I never wanted to have that conversation with my parents, but I wanted to show them that I was mature enough to talk to them instead of sneaking my girlfriend in and out of my room when no one was watching. Cue the awkward, "Can I make love in my room?" conversation. My mom struggled to accept the fact that I was intimately active, and got upset at me for expecting her to allow me to make love under her roof. In other words, the answer was no. I was 17 at the time. My mom completely lost her mind after that conversation and decided to start hiking all of a sudden, which was an obvious excuse to patrol the woods where my girlfriend and I made love. She even managed to convince other like-minded moms to hike with her because my girlfriend and I were not the only teenagers hooking up in the woods. I called them the neighborhood watch. My girlfriend and I were forced to go deeper into the woods to lower the risk of not only being caught by real hikers but also by mother hikers, aka the NWW. I was confidently leading the way to our new intimate spot until I realized I had no idea where we were anymore. I was low-key experiencing post-nut clarity but without the nut. There were no signs or trails anywhere. My girlfriend and I spent most of the afternoon retracing our steps instead of making love. I don't know how long we were lost, but it was beginning to get dark when we made it out of the woods. My girlfriend was not happy with me at all. She made it clear that she was done screwing in the woods forever. My mom successfully made the woods screw-proof and C-blocked me. Not much has changed since I turned 18. I'm still living at home with the leader of the NWW. My girlfriend and I are not making love as often as we used to because the woods are off limits and we're too poor to pay for privacy. For the record, if you're in my position due to the increase in moms in the woods, I'm sorry. How did your marriage end? He came home from work, ate dinner, and said, I want you to do something and I don't want you to fight me on this. I want a divorce. I was completely blindsided. Then he packed a bag and left for his mother's house. I made him leave his key. He didn't understand that. How will I get in the house? I replied that he had no reason to enter the house when I wasn't home. He didn't live there anymore. He was shocked. I started thinking about his infidelity and the microaggressions that had recently increased. For Christmas he had given me a bottle of men's cologne. That's it. Of course, he kept it for himself. It was evident that he had given my gift absolutely no thought. So instead of begging him to stay, I emptied out the joint accounts and made an appointment with a family attorney for the next day. Of course he wanted to drag things out. He came to get his things the same week, and I watched TV while he packed and loaded the car. He actually asked me to help. I said this is something you want to do, not me. Before he left, I told him that I know he is still committing adultery and that my attorney said he should be careful about that. Lots of denying and sputtering, but the thing that bothered him most was my getting a lawyer. He actually said, you got a lawyer? You know I will always take care of you. Don't you trust me? By the way, he told me the reason he needed space was the children are grown now, so I don't have to pretend anymore. I never wanted a family that I had to hang out with. So that was the end. A year later, a judge granted me about a third of his assets and income as alimony until I remarry or die. We were married 32 years, and I was 65 years old. I'm sitting pretty comfortably and very peacefully in a different city. Except for incidental paperwork handled by my attorney, I have no contact. I don't have to pretend anymore, either. What's the most insane Bible story? The story of Onan. The dude gets smote by God because he refuses to come inside his brother's wife, Genesis 38 8-10. Then Judah told Onan, sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. The girl that Onan was supposed to get pregnant was his older brother Er's wife, Tamar. Did something terrible, so God killed him before she could get pregnant. Then Onan pulled out, and God killed him. So Judah, her father-in-law, said, wait till my youngest son Shelah is old enough to get married, and I'll set you up. In the meantime, why don't you stay with your family? So she did. Shelah grows up, and apparently, Judah forgets about his deal with Tamar because they never get married. One of Judah's daughters dies, so he decides to go out to shear some sheep near Timnath. Tamar hears about this, disguises herself as a whore, and places herself conveniently between Judah and Timnath. Judah sees her, does not recognize her, and asks her to do business in exchange for a kid from his flock. She also collects Judah's staff, signets, and bracelets as collateral. They bang. She gets pregnant and leaves in the morning before Judah wakes up. Judah sends a friend to where she was with the kid, but no one is there. 3 months later, word comes to Judah that Tamar, his daughter-in-law, is pregnant by some fool. So he sends for her so he can burn her alive for her sins. Tamar arrives with his shit and says, whoever stuff this is the dad. Then Judah realizes he was an asshole for not following up on his end of the deal and lets Tamar live, so eventually, she gives birth to twins. What is your scariest experience? My father's ex-girlfriend tried to make me take her medication without me knowing. She had kidney problems, was waiting for a transplant and had to go 3 times a week to dialysis. So she was on a lot of pills and things, was going to a psychiatrist too, and there was a lot of food and drinks she couldn't take like Coca-Cola. For her, any kind of soda was a 1 glass once a month kind of thing unless she wanted a trip in an ambulance. And I always have been a huge soda fan. At that time I had a glass with lunch and another one with dinner. We always had extra bottles and I was the only one who drank them at my home. So one day I go to take a sip and surprise, there's no soda in the fridge. I go for one of the extra bottles, and there's none. That's the first signal something was wrong, because my father was very adamant that the pantry had to be always full. I check again the fridge and there was a bottle, one of those of 0.75 liter bottles we never, ever bought. My father's girlfriend was already a meanie at the time, acted with me as if I was 3 instead of 19, had managed to upset my sister so much she was living somewhere else, and I had the impression she was trying to do the same with me, trying to fight with me for little things because she knew my father would always take her side. So when I saw that bottle I decided I wouldn't touch it, no way Jose. 2 weeks come by and the bottle is still there, untouched, and even the soda I bought myself just disappeared in thin air a day after. Finally my dad asks about the small bottle, saying if it had gone bad or something, or if he could take it. He said all of this while looking at me, because, again, I was the soda drinker and the girlfriend couldn't have almost any because of her kidney. And then that woman fans herself all worried and goes, oh no, no, you can't drink it. I have put my medicine on it so it's easier to take without feeling its taste. Do not touch it. I swear I felt pale. This woman was on a ton of things, serious things. Anyone could have taken that bottle. And I know my father didn't buy her story, but he just smiled, nodded and said he would buy me some soda the next day because he had noticed there wasn't any left. So, just to be clear, she couldn't drink soda, Her medicine was with strict dosage because it wasn't just some ibuprofen, and we are talking about somebody who painted her whole water bottle black with messages like "Don't drink poison." Sarah's propriety. Just so she could track properly how much water she took every day. And this woman decided to take her medicine with soda, not telling anyone, in a non-marked bottle. At the same time all the rest of the soda disappeared. All of it made me start to think and put some things together, like the way I always felt sick after she'd take care of making dinner, and the way she put all the food in a central plate except mine, something that at first I took as a favor to me because I prefer it that way. What funny thing happened at school that caused utter chaos for the faculty? It was a typical Monday morning, and I was on my way to my first period math class, feeling pretty confident that I nailed my weekend homework. As I enter the classroom, I notice a small commotion on the teacher's desk, but I didn't pay it too much attention and took my seat in the back. Now, my math teacher was a sweet little old lady who always had a smile on her face, but something about her demeanor this morning was a little off. Before we could get started with the lesson, she starts frantically searching through her desk, muttering to herself and getting more upset by the minute. All of a sudden, she let out a blood-curdling shriek that had everyone in the class jumping out of their seats. What the hell is going on? I scream out in frustration. The teacher leans over her desk, clutching her chest like she's about to have a heart attack, and then I see it, the source of all the commotion. It was a small, fluffy hamster, scurrying across the desk with a smug expression on his face. And that little bastard had chewed through all of the cords to the teacher's computer. The teacher was in hysterics, wailing about how she was going to lose all of her lesson plans and grading for the entire semester. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but smirk at the chaos this little rodent had caused. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm glad the teacher lost all of her files or anything, but it was pretty damn funny to watch her running around like a chicken with her head cut off. Unfortunately, the school administration didn't think it was all that funny. As soon as the word got out about what happened in my math class, the entire school was put on lockdown for the rest of the day while they searched for the hamster. And to top it all off, I ended up getting detention because the school thought that I must have had something to do with it, even though I was innocent. But the best part? I later found out that the hamster belonged to a fellow student of mine, who had snuck him into the classroom in her backpack. I couldn't help but feel a little envious of her for having the guts to pull off such a hilarious prank. Maybe I'll have to up my game and try something similar next time. After all, chaos is always a little too thrilling to resist.
What's a red flag that you ignored in a significant other, only to realize it was a big deal later? I thought it was just part of being a good girlfriend, but then I realized that he was just taking advantage of me. I started seeing this guy in college. I'll call him Ben. We'd been friends in high school, went to senior prom together, but didn't start dating until college. He went to the university in the middle of the city and I went to a private university on the outskirts of the city, very secluded. They were about a 15-minute bus ride away from one another. So Ben and I start hanging out all the time. We snuggle, have long movie nights, he sometimes sleeps over. We were going slowly and sweetly and after other crappy guys, it was nice. The thing about Ben that plays into this story was he came from money. A lot of money. His parents were paying for his entire college experience out of pocket. He was forced to volunteer 1 hour a week at the library for class. I had zero financial support. I had to maintain grades for scholarships, take out loans, and I had 2 campus jobs. Whenever we ordered in, we'd split the cost, and since he had a full refrigerator at his place, a lot of the time I would just send him home with leftovers. I didn't mind this. What's fair is fair. It was 2006, and I'm a modern woman. After a few months he wanted to start doing more things. Weekends away, obscure art shows, stuff like that. The thing was, he wanted each of us to pay our own way. At this point I didn't really have any spare money. And I had 2 jobs to schedule around. My friends thought that perhaps I was a moron and not actually in a relationship at all since he never paid for anything and somehow we only did the things he wanted to do. Being young, I asked him one night if he considered us boyfriend and girlfriend and he said absolutely. That felt very romantic at the time, so I called in sick to my more profitable job and attended my first art show, an Andy Warhol nightmare that cost $60 to get in. That was my food budget, but I wanted to be a good girlfriend. And he wanted to go away to some vineyard next. We were too young to drink legally, but his parents knew the owners. This would have involved gas money and a place to stay. Finally I just had to tell him that I couldn't afford these excursions. He was outraged. He said it was clear that I was only dating him for his money. And that it wasn't his job to take care of me or show me a good time. It was dramatic. I realized that our entire relationship had been a series of tests. What was I willing to do to make him happy? How much was I literally willing to pay? It's worth noting that due to our schools both being in the city we had access to all the local museums for free, but he complained they weren't good enough. He told me to call him when I was ready to apologize. I really hope he's not still waiting by the phone. It's been like 11 years.
I went through my girlfriend's phone and it left me broken. I, 22 male, have been dating my girlfriend, 21 female, for a few months now and I thought she was a very sweet person. She was my first girlfriend. In fact, she was my first freaking everything because I grew up with strict, abusive parents. She genuinely seemed like a decent person. The only thing that threw me off was that sometimes when we were on our phones cuddling, sleeping, or close to each other, she'd slowly move her body and phone away from my field of view. Whatever, I didn't really think it was a big deal because she could have just wanted some privacy. One day, I went over to her place and she went to shower, leaving her unlocked phone on the drawer. I know that this may be a breach of privacy, but I was just really curious to why she'd try to hide her phone from my field of view. I didn't really check much, but one thing in particular that left my heart in shambles was a group chat with her girlfriends, with some of the names that I had recognized. I took a screenshot and sent it to myself. These were the messages, word for word. Her, no, his D is small. Her, it's like 3, what the F am I supposed to do with this? Girlfriend 1, ah ha 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 ha. Girlfriend 2, you deserve better. Girlfriend 3, he has an actual shrimp lol. Girlfriend 1, shrimp emoji. Girlfriend 4, and there goes his flaw. I had stopped reading there and bawled my eyes out. I packed my stuff up and left. When we made love, she laughed at my willy, and I'm not gonna lie, that had really killed the mood for me, and I didn't want to be intimate anymore, especially as a V card holder. I just barely held a stiffy and wanted to crawl in a hole. For the record, yes, my willy is smaller than average, if we consider the global average as 5.2 inches, but it's actually 3.5 non-bone pressed, not 3 inches, not that it matters anyway, but I kinda felt like I'd say this. I've been super messed up mentally after I went back to my place. I texted my manager about taking a week off. During that week I had stopped going to the gym and spent every day primarily in bed, crying. I didn't talk to her at all. I only had like 600 calories of food daily, a couple apples and a protein shake, and I only probably showered like twice. It's been 2 or so days after that week and I'm doing a bit better now. I'm going back to work and I've been slowly easing my way back to my original gym routine. I still haven't talked to her though because it'll probably make me depressed again. I've always been insecure about my willy ever since my teenage years and I just don't get why it's okay to willy shame, as if I have any control over that. It's not like I don't want an average willy. I had never once made any negative remarks about her lady parts, or any woman's lady part for that matter, because I know that it's not stuff that can be controlled. This all just sucks. What movie is really sad when told from the villain's perspective? Jaws. Bruce is just trying to be a shark. Man. The Bee Movie. A bee stole this man's girlfriend. Like bro, I'm not saying Scar was right for killing his brother and running the Pride lands into the ground, but they call him Scar because he had a physical deformity. Before he was nicknamed Scar, his parents named him Taka, which means garbage. Oh hi. Let me introduce you to my son's king and garbage. How is that not setting your youngest up for failure? Baby's father in Dirty Dancing. Dude just wants to have a nice family vacation. Man. The Grinch just wanted to hang out with his dog on the mountain, and asked his stupid neighbors to shut up. Thor 1. Loki loses everything, finds out his whole life is a lie, even his skin is a lie. The people who he was supposed to trust the most, his parents, betrayed him about who he was and brought him up in a society that thought his real race were disgusting savage monsters to the point that he thought it was okay to try and kill them all. And in the middle of having a mental breakdown his dad goes into a coma while his mom is emotionally unavailable to give him any support because she's busy watching the dad, and his friends betray him to go help his brother on Earth. So he is completely isolated with no support system, undergoing the worst crisis of his life, and goes off the rails, to the point of committing suicide because he realized no matter what he did he could never gain the approval of his father or belong there as the only frost giant in all of Asgard. It's an epic tragedy when you look at it from his perspective. Mrs. Doubtfire, because imagine how scared Pierce Brosnan was when Mrs. Doubtfire tried to kill him with pepper. What's the most depressing reason someone got stuck in their job? My high school chemistry teacher was the smartest guy I know, so one day I asked him why he settled for only being a high school teacher. He told me, listen here you little shish, here's why. You and your friends mostly worry about girls and getting laid, and that's all you've had to worry about since the Vietnam War ended. I lived in England during World War II. And when I turned 13 in 1941 I was volunteered into service at the British bomber base near our village. We weren't allowed to touch any weapons, so our job was mostly to do whatever the ground crew told us. Each morning before school my friends and I rode our bikes a few miles to the base and set about doing whatever chores were needed. The worst job was cleaning out the planes. After missions, the planes were often a mess with vomit, human excrement, and blood all over the place. When I turned 14 I was promoted to helping remove the dead bodies, and body parts, from the bombers, and then supervise the younger boys as we cleaned up the mess. I spent 1942 to 1945 carrying dead boys out of airplanes, and cleaning up the mess so the crews that had known them were spared that chore before having to later climb back into the same aircraft for their next mission. Now ask yourself what types of things you've been doing over the past year? I did my job with a certain knowledge that when I turned 17 it would be my turn to man the aircraft on these missions, as some of the older boys before me had already done. The war ended prior to my 17th birthday, and when I later got a chance to visit relatives in the States I jumped at the opportunity and never looked back. I had made my peace with God and swore that if I survived the war, I'd live a quiet and happy life without asking him for anything more. So that's why I'm just a high school teacher. I started doing volunteer research at the local VA hospital soon afterwards. No lifting bodies out of planes there, but I did work with a few body parts. Little did I know at the time how watching a seemingly endless stream of vets die from metastatic melanoma, lung cancer, and emphysema would change the future trajectory of my life. To think, it all started with listen here you little shish. Am I the a-hole for asking my in-laws to stop discussing my stepson's social media posts around my son? I have a 12-year-old son named Luca, and he has an older stepbrother, Henry, who is 19. Unfortunately, Henry has never shown much interest in having a relationship with Luca. In fact, he can be distant and even mean to Luca for no reason other than wanting to spend time with him. Initially, Henry used to live with us, but as a teenager, he made the decision to live primarily with his mom in another city. This relocation meant that we didn't get to see Henry as often, which was difficult for Luca, who missed his brother and couldn't understand why Henry didn't want to spend time with him. Henry has been in a relationship with a girl for the past 2 years, and apparently, he posts frequently about her on Facebook and spends a lot of time with her younger brothers, aged 13 and 11. My in-laws, especially my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, often mention how great Henry is with these boys and how he spends so much time with them. This news is tough for Luca to hear because he wonders why Henry is acting like a big brother to other kids but not to him. One day, my sister-in-law even mentioned that Henry referred to the boys as his brothers from other parents and expressed how lucky he was to have them in his life. Luca has undergone therapy to help him understand his relationship with Henry, both when Henry lived with us and after he moved to live with his mom in another city. But I can see how much it hurts Luca. My husband already spoke to my in-laws about how hearing updates about Henry on social media is not helping Luca. However, they continued to discuss Henry's posts and even showed Luca a video where Henry claimed he no longer felt like an only child. At this point, I felt the need to address the issue directly and asked my in-laws to significantly reduce how much they bring up Henry's social media posts when Luca is present. They questioned why, and I explained that. It is difficult for Luca to hear about Henry claiming others as his siblings and making an effort to be close to them while rejecting Luca. I assumed they would understand how these conversations would hurt Luca. However, they accused me of unfairly trying to control their speech and claimed that I didn't want to hear about Henry anymore because I was bitter about him rejecting me as a mother and favoring his mother instead. Am I the asshole, am I the a-hole, for requesting this from my in-laws? My husband and I are now considering limiting Luca's time with his family for his well-being. Additional information, just to provide some clarity, my husband and I are Luca's biological parents, and Luca and Henry are half-brothers.
My sister-in-law keeps asking for my husband's sample. My, 26, sister-in-law, 26, keeps asking for my husband, 28, sample. To give a little backstory, my sister-in-law is a lesbian. This is relevant information to the story. She has 2 kids from a previous marriage to a man. She is now married again to a wonderful woman who I love dearly. They recently have decided that they want to grow their family and have kids of their own. Sister-in-law first brought up the topic years ago right after she came out and was in her first lesbian relationship. My husband has told her no countless times, but she keeps persistently asking. Her reasoning is that she wants a kid with the genetic makeup of both her and her wife, which I understand. My husband has said no for multiple reasons. When my husband was a little under 2, he had cancer in his eye which resulted in the removal of said eye. He has gone through so much and is continuing to go through a lot because of this. He does not want to risk putting another life though that. Reason number 2 being that I cannot have kids. I have been dealing with infertility issues for as long as I can remember. I have had multiple miscarriages and was told by multiple doctors that I cannot carry a baby. My husband doesn't want to put me though seeing his child with someone else. I know that we will not have any legal relationship to the child but know that the baby is genetically my husband's. That would unalive me. My sister-in-law doesn't think that it's a big deal, but honestly it's kind of hurtful. Sister-in-law was my best friend way before I even met my husband. She knows firsthand the issues and experiences I've had. It honestly just feels like a slap in the face. How can I explain to sister-in-law how this makes me feel? She is hard to talk to if it's not about her. I met sister-in-law in middle school. We became best friends instantly. I met her brother when I was 19 and we began dating. We got married 4 years later. I've known sister-in-law for years before I met her brother, also known as my husband. My boyfriend is refusing to let me post our pregnancy announcement on social media. Is there something else going on? Me and my boyfriend have been together for just under 2 years. We celebrate our anniversary in December, and a few months ago we found out I was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but I've always dreamed about becoming a mother, so I was very happy about it, and he was also very excited about becoming a father when I told him the news. We told our parents and siblings after the first ultrasound at 8 weeks and slowly told our closest friends in the following few weeks. Initially when we discussed it, we agreed to post an announcement for all our extended family and friends on Instagram after the first trimester. When I hit 13 weeks, the time came around and I began to suggest various ways of announcing it, planning what pictures to use, captions etc., but he shut it down and said he thinks it's too early and it's better to wait until we find out the gender. Well, a month later we found out we were having a baby girl, and once again I began the discussion of the announcement post, and once again he shut it down and said we should wait until halfway through the pregnancy. I questioned him on this, asking why he was so hesitant, and he couldn't give me an answer other than he doesn't think it's the right time. My Instagram account is private and followed only by friends and families I know, while his is public. He is a professional athlete in his sport and he has thousands of followers who he does not know. I thought he may have concerns over his private life mixing with his public life, so suggested we only post the announcement on my account, as most of his friends follow me anyway, and he can tell his extended family each individually. He said he didn't care about that but wouldn't elaborate on why he doesn't want me to post about our pregnancy. In the meantime, I also noticed that he changed the captions of some of his Instagram posts with me in them to remove any indication of how long we have been together. For example, last year he posted a lovely post celebrating our 1-year anniversary, and I noticed that he changed the caption a couple of days ago to remove any reference to an anniversary or that we had been together 1 year. I'm wondering if he's feeling insecure at how early on in the relationship we're pregnant and is having doubts over the pregnancy, or if there's someone that we both know that he doesn't want to see the post. Has anyone else been in this situation before? Should I be worried or concerned?
How did your friend stab you in the back? My friend was dating a girl who I could tell just didn't like me, but at least we were civil to one another, until the camping trip on the May 24th holiday weekend. She was adamant about keeping our alcohol separate. That was fine. I had my beer, they had their Mike's Hard Lemonades, fine. Then I got up early on the first morning and made pancakes for everyone, Why? Because that's just how I roll. When the campers rolled out of their tents to the smell of apple cinnamon pancakes and campfire coffee, she was the only one to flip out. I'd gone into her cooler and used her margarine. My buddy just looked pained and tried to keep the peace as I apologized. Her reaction was to grab a lock from his gym bag and lock their tent with their booze and their food. Later, he came to me and asked if he could borrow the car, so that they could run into town, get some Johnnies and have some words about being a bit easier with the other campers. I said okay, and handed him the keys. When they returned hours later, the tank was empty, and the field kitchen was missing from the back of the station wagon. We searched the camp, nothing. It was my dad's and had been handed down in the family for generations. I drove off to fill the tank and buy a new tub of margarine, and was halfway down the country road when I saw the Wanigan on the side of the road, smashed in the ditch. There were marks along the back panels beside the flattened down seats where one of them had clearly pushed it out the back of the moving car. After piling it all, stunned, piece by piece back into the wagon, I gassed up and drove back, then packed up. Not a word was said by anyone, until I tore up the camping permit and peeled out with their shouts behind me in the dust. Never spoke to either one of them again. My overprotective older brother has beef with me for bringing over a boy. My brother is older than me by about 5 years. When I was a baby, he apparently played with me all the time. When I got older, he wanted nothing to do with me. What teenage boy would want to deal with their younger sister? So when I got to a teenager, I was like, fine, ignore me, but of course, he now wanted his little sis. But you see, I wasn't exactly up to his standard. It seemed like every chance he got, he liked to call me stupid. And not just in the siblings being siblings way. From adult conversations with him, he has it in his head that our mom pushed him to get A's, while I was allowed to get B's. What he doesn't seem to understand is that he has a near photographic memory and him not trying hard got him A's, whereas me working my ass off, I was lucky to get a B in some classes. School was incredibly hard for me, whereas he skipped a grade. But he doesn't see that, I just had it easier. He later tells me that he was just being hard on me because nobody else would. Total BS. Then he insulted everything I enjoyed. Why do you like X? X is for kids, grow up. He's put down anything that I thought was fun. He'd poop on my few hobbies. Tell me to get out of my virtual world. There's a lot of things I wanted to try as a kid, but my mom, being a single mom, could only do so much, and my brother, of course, signed up for everything and asked permission later. So guess who was dragged around to everything of his? So I had to find things to do on my own while he went and had fun. And then he insulted my looks. I still consider myself a tomboy. I've always been comfort over fashion. I'm not a slob though. I hate dresses and skirts. I hate the idea of a purse, and I have a very unisex bag now that is 100% function. But no, he always yelled at my mom that she was letting me stunt my growth. That she should be forcing me to wear more girly clothes and wear makeup. He wanted me to dress more like a typical girl. Screw that, I think it looks dumb, makes me feel dumb, and I didn't want to do it. I needed to do it and my mom was just enabling me by not forcing me. He always came first. For example, my senior year of high school, I'm in a club for the second year, which is a huge deal for me, since I never did clubs, and I was doing a competition that I felt great about and was about to head to the state competition. I had a shot at nationals. He was planning on getting married and had 2 dates he was thinking about. My birthday weekend or the week after, the weekend of nationals. I do not care about my birthday and really wanted to go to nationals. He said to my face that I wasn't going to make the cut and he planned the wedding for that weekend. I got first in state. And he made sure to say as much as he could to make me feel guilty AF if I decided to go to nationals instead of his wedding. And this competition was directly related to my future major. This is just the biggie that has stuck with me over the years, but basically, if there's anything you want to plan, his plans will always be more important, and screw you for thinking otherwise. But he never sees that. When I got a great internship offer, he almost immediately started trying to put it down like it wasn't that great. His wife shut him up. I'm a naturally shy person and don't like doing much that pushes me into the spotlight. But I should be able to share with my family, right? But after years of verbal abuse from my brother, I don't like telling him anything. I bring my first boyfriend home for Thanksgiving, which at 23 years old, is still a very odd concept to me. He gets beyond pissed because I didn't tell him. He then starts bringing up every little thing that I have done wrong and that my mom has done wrong. He feels insulted and wants nothing more than to just storm off and drive home. His wife made him stay, but so much for a happy Thanksgiving. I try to explain why I didn't tell him, but nope, won't see it from my point of view. We managed to get him to stay for dinner, but he's more or less said that he's never going over to my parents' house again. He eventually called up my mom and said he would like to try and work on a relationship with her, but he might never talk to me again. Have you ever met a serial unaliver? Yes, his name was Peter Sutcliffe. He's still in prison and he was the reason I stopped hitchhiking. I was a young man living in the north of England, Yorkshire. I just started dating a girl from Leeds a good few miles away from me. I was pretty engrossed with this girl, she was my first, so subsequently I missed the last bus home and had to walk. Her family were dead against me spending the night. So off I went. It was around 11 and I lived about 7 miles away, so I had at least an hour's walk home. I started thumbing a lift. There wasn't much traffic, but I lived in hope. I'd been walking for about 20 minutes when I heard a car in the distance behind me. I stuck out my thumb and prayed. The car stopped and the front passenger door popped open. I should explain I had fairly long hair back then and wore it in a ponytail. So I climb into this car and the driver just stares at me for a good 10 seconds. His first sentence was, "I thought you were a girl." Which wasn't quite as weird as it sounds, but he did seem to be a bit peeved that a spotty teenage lad got in his car instead of a girl. He asked where I was off to, so I told him it was the next village. It was on his way and wasn't a problem. Quick 10-minute car journey. Anyway, he started chatting about mundane stuff, football mainly. Then he asked if I had a girlfriend and had I effed her tonight. With that he tried to grab my hand, laughing and asking to sniff my fingers. I was getting really freaked out at this. I was quite a naive young lad back then. He then proceeded to tell me about his last girlfriend and how he'd roped her because she wouldn't give him intimacy. I tell you, all I wanted to do was get the F out of that car. My village was fast approaching, and at my road end I asked him to stop and drop me off. Which, thankfully, is what he did. As I got out he said, "You're a lucky lad, there's a lot of nasty bastards out there who'd have robbed you and took you for a ride." I mumbled my thanks and legged it home like the devil was chasing me. I was so bloody scared. 3 weeks later on the national news I saw the bloke who gave me a lift. He was charged with the rope and unalives of several young women around my area.
You break into someone's house, what are you stealing that will only mildly inconvenience them? Take all the labels off all the cans in the house. The toilet seat. A single inch from a single table leg. For every table, all their shit is going to have a permanent wobble. I would take all the batteries out of the remotes. All of the seasoning packets from their ramen. I will take, use, and return all of their coupons. All of the light bulb.
My tuna kitty smelling wife made me raise her a fair baby. Now I love her, and my daughter wants to unalive herself. I married my wife 23 years ago and I had a happy life. We had 4 kids together and I was overjoyed. Around our 4th child's conception, my wife was acting really odd. I assumed it'll be fine, but when my little girl came around, everything was alright again. I thought nothing was wrong for 19 years. However, one day a man WH came to the door claiming to be my daughter's father. He said that he was sick of having a creep raise his daughter. Turns out, when he was hooking up with my wife, she would tell him all the bad things I did to her to help get him off. She would whisper how I roped her at night and how I baby-trapped her with all of our kids. Naturally, this made him finish in her. When my wife found out she was pregnant, she ghosted him and hid the affair from me. I mean, the dude literally thought I was abusing her, so you can guess the hostility he had when he came. As soon as he realized it was me, he punched me extremely hard. I couldn't believe this ugly hairy man slept with my wife. My daughter had to see it. When my daughter realized what was going on, she immediately withdrew herself from us. I don't know how to get her back. My little girl thinks that her existence is evil. It's been quite possibly the worst few weeks of my life, but she took it so much worse than I did. She calls herself a B-stard. She won't talk to her siblings or her mother, and only apologizes to me. I don't give an F if she's half T-Rex. I love her with every bone in my body, and she tried to take her life last night. My wife found her. She's going to be okay, but this can't happen again. I can't talk to anyone about this. I don't want my family to know. I don't know how to be what she needs. Please help. My tuna kitty smelling wife made me raise her a fair baby. Now I have to fight off child abuse claims from my delusional wife. Let's call my non-biological daughter Jane. My other 3 kids are John, 21, Jill, 17, and Jenny, 15. John, Jill, and Jenny went out and got DNA tested behind my back. The other 3 kids are all biologically mine. They made a big show of giving the results at a family dinner that was supposed to help us all bond again as a family after the original issue, and it upset my daughter a lot. She felt rejected, and honestly, I felt insulted that they hadn't respected my wishes and let sleeping dogs lie at least until things were more stable. I started my absolute best to make Jane feel more safe once she came home. I started sleeping on the couch in her room so she could talk to me if she ever woke up feeling like she had to. I've been taking her and her siblings out a lot more than I used to. I got her presents, and tried to be there for her. I even did something I haven't done since high school, and broke out my old guitar and wrote her a song. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. I guess I thought she'd be able to understand I wasn't full of it. My soon-to-be ex-wife decided to use all of this to accuse me of being creepy to Jane, saying now that I know we're not related I'm preying on her. She said this in front of Jane. It caused Jane to have a second mental breakdown, and it caused me to call a lawyer and start planning for divorce. This is, in my opinion, a far more unforgivable offense than the cheating. She's my daughter. I'm going to fight like hell for as much custody of Jill and Jenny as possible, and the good news is, they both seem to want to live with me, and they're old enough that it matters. Those comments, however, made getting through to Jane extremely difficult. I'm worried she'll attempt every day, and she doesn't want me sleeping in her room anymore. I hate my wife with every bone in my body for causing this mess. I can't tell my daughter I love her anymore without scaring her, and she was already scared our relationship was going to change. She says she believes me when I tell her I would never in a million years see her as anything but my child, but she flinches when I hug her. How the heck do I fix this? I called the cops on my boyfriend tonight. I had been with my boyfriend for 1.5 years. He recently moved in with me not that long ago. After living with me for some time he started accusing me of cheating on him. He tried to unalive himself on one occasion and threw himself out of a moving car on a different occasion when I would try to end things with him. I wanted to end things with him because I couldn't take being accused of cheating on him over and over again just because I didn't want to do it. After he tried to unalive himself and his grandmother shifted all the blame for his behavior onto me, I stupidly gave him one last chance. I know it was stupid and I don't want to hear any more about how I should have known better, I should have ended it the first time, etc. I know all those things by now. Tonight he woke me up multiple times, holding my hands down, groping me, and I told him multiple times to stop because I had to be up early for work. Then he woke me up biting my arm and I had to hit him on the arm to get him to stop. He grabbed me by my necklace and pulled on it till it broke and he threw it on the floor. And I got up and left the room. I called the cops and he came into the living room and tried grabbing me again when I was on the phone with 911. Then he put his fist through the glass of my snake's terrarium that cost me roughly $1,000 to build up. He again tried to say he was sorry, but I've heard that before again and again. My snake is fine, his hide protected him. He is in a small 10-gallon terrarium right now that I had as backup. He's not full grown yet so it will do until I get a new full-size terrarium. But I had to throw nearly everything away I had acquired for him because slivers of glass were all over the wood hides and decorations and wouldn't wash off. My now ex-boyfriend is currently in jail and I don't know how I can work this morning in a job that requires me to drive for hours. I'm emotionally a wreck and I keep going back and forth in my head over whether I really needed to call the cops or not. I don't know why I'm sitting here blaming myself for his actions. I'm upset that he broke the necklace my mother gave me for my birthday years ago. I'm upset that he shattered the terrarium I spent months building up. I'm all over the place mentally and emotionally and I hate myself for it. I needed to vent this. I don't want advice or finger pointing. It's done and over and he's in jail. Tomorrow I will bag up his stuff. My wife is denying we're married and wants to be called my girlfriend. I'm confused. My wife and I have been married for 4 years now, coming on 5. We have generally had a good relationship and a good marriage. We had a reasonably expensive wedding, which we still pay for now. I get the bill every month to prove it. My wife planned the wedding, so it was to her taste. She seemed to enjoy it at the time and for the first few years of our marriage, she would look back at the wedding with me happily often, and without any issues. In recent months I've noticed my wife's attitude to our wedding and our marriage itself. It began with her referring to herself as my girlfriend. For example, she told me to buy her a girlfriend card for Valentine's Day rather than a wife card. I thought she was just playing around at first and went along. But this behavior has only escalated. 2 months ago, my wife stopped wearing her wedding ring. I was understandably upset and asked her if there was something wrong. She told me everything was fine and she just doesn't like the sensation of jewelry on her hands. My wife has never liked rings and jewelry, so this could be the case. But when we are with friends, my wife will get upset if I talk about her as my wife rather than just a girlfriend. She will go as far to interrupt me if I'm talking or telling a story to correct me on our relationship. Initially, this was something our friends laughed at, but now everybody just finds it understandably awkward. One of our friends was talking about their own wedding, which is scheduled for early next year. They asked for advice from my wife about how she'd planned ours and my wife responded with what wedding? When our friend continued talking about the table decorations my wife had used, my wife visibly teared up in front of the whole group and had to step outside. Later that evening, I asked her directly if she has a problem with our relationship or if I'm doing something wrong in our marriage. She assured me that everything is fine between us. From my perspective, outside of this issue, our relationship is as strong as ever. We are considering kids in the near future, our sex life is great, and my wife recently suggested we get matching tattoos as a renewal of our love. Is there advice anyone can offer on why my wife might be acting like this and what I should do? When my favorite person made me feel invisible, unnoticed, and non-existent. Why? I felt invisible whenever our professor took attendance. He called out everyone's names except mine. On the first day of class, he greeted everyone except me. It was as if I didn't exist in his eyes, even though I had always been present in his class. I had never missed a single day in his lectures for the past 2 years. So why couldn't he see me now? When I tried to greet him, it felt like I was a passing breeze, ignored and unnoticed. There was a quiz where our professor handed out the test papers and I overheard him complaining about carrying so many, even though it was just the right amount. He even asked the person sitting in front of me if anyone was absent, while handing out the quiz paper. I felt sad because we used to have a normal and friendly student-professor relationship. Now, it seemed like he was being serious with me. I was not trying to be a teacher's pet, I was just like any other student, easygoing and able to joke around. I was aware that I tended to be serious and introverted, and during those times, I felt comfortable in his class. It used to be my safe and comforting place in school, but now it felt like a minor threat. There were times when I wanted to open up and have a private conversation with him, but I was afraid he would misunderstand, thinking I had ill intentions. I was also the leader of an activity, so I preferred not to address the issue, fearing it might affect our group dynamics. I was reflecting on whether I had done something to upset him in the past, but honestly, I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't find any fault with him, as I saw him as a good teacher every student should admire. I didn't know what to do with his sudden change in behavior towards me. Furthermore, I was even more confused because whenever I had a class-related question and approached him, he would respond in a nice and comforting way, just like before. It was only these certain instances that bothered me. I kept telling myself not to care, but I couldn't help but notice. I would think about it on my way home. With graduation approaching, all I wanted was to have healthy relationships with my professors. Even if I didn't strive for academic validation or high grades, I just wanted to finish my studies without any bad blood between my professors and myself. Maybe I would address this issue after graduation. For now, I will just put it aside and focus on my studies.
What was a time when your child was right about a gut feeling? It was a sunny afternoon, and I decided to take my sister's 7-year-old son, Liam, to the local park. As we approached the playground, Liam became visibly uneasy. He clutched my hand tighter and hesitated to go play on the swings, which he usually loved. I asked him what was wrong, and he pointed to a man sitting on a bench nearby. The man was dressed in casual clothes, reading a newspaper, and seemed harmless. But Liam whispered, "I don't like that man." Something feels off. I tried to reassure him, saying, "It's okay, honey. He's just reading his newspaper. There's nothing to worry about." But Liam was adamant, "I don't want to play here today. Can we go somewhere else?" I was torn. Part of me wanted to encourage Liam to face his fears and not judge strangers without reason. But another part of me trusted Liam's instincts. After a moment's hesitation, I decided to listen to Liam. We left the park and headed to a nearby ice cream parlor instead. A few days later, I was chatting with a neighbor, and she mentioned a recent incident at the same park. A man had been approaching children, trying to lure them away with promises of candy and toys. The description she gave matched the man Liam had pointed out. The police were alerted, and it turned out the man had a history of suspicious behavior around children. I was shaken by the revelation and immensely grateful that I had listened to Liam's gut feeling. It was a stark reminder that sometimes, children have an innate sense of danger that adults might overlook.
What happened to your school bully? She got pregnant at 19, was forced by her parents to get married, had her baby, moved out of state, became a drug addict, got divorced, went to AA, did all the steps, but somehow forgot me in the whole make amends thing, got remarried, had another child, got divorced again. Bitterly, she had her mother pay for her to make a 5-hour flight every weekend for a year and a half because she wanted to take classes at a community college that was doing a weekend course, but she didn't want to move. Her mother did so for her. Appallingly, she now calls herself some kind of spiritual counselor, even though she is just as sick and messed up as she ever was. How do I know all of this? Oh, wait, this wasn't my school bully, my bullying came from within my own family. I was bullied unmercifully for most of my life, school years and far beyond, primarily, but not solely, by my cousin with whom we shared parents, and grew up as siblings, one house away from each other, with no boundaries. She is a sick, malignant, narcissistic sociopath to this day. Unlike some school bullies I've heard of, who regret their actions, she is unrepentant, and still tries to heap her toxic crap on me when she gets a chance. I have been estranged from her for years, yet, I did call her sister a year or so ago to give my condolences for the passing of their mother, whom I was also partially raised by, which opened the floodgates, within 15 seconds of the call, for her to berate me, and for the two of them to unleash a barrage of toxic emails to me, with regard to my estrangement from my own mother, for similar reasons, so, nothing has changed. She grew up entitled. She's never had a day of remorse, or even acknowledgement of how she destroyed and defined my life. Thank God she, and the rest of them, are not in it anymore. 50 years was enough.
What's something everyone should experience in their lifetime? Seeing the Milky Way. A healthy non-toxic relationship. Looking at a clear sky full of stars. Done that on a beach with a clear sky on a starry night and saw 5 shooting stars in 10 minutes. I was fully amazed. Getting a hug from someone who has been waiting all day to see you. Living by yourself. The Northern Lights. They really are beautiful. Getting to know people that aren't like you. Financial security. I've never had it, and that simple fact has caused me more stress and anxiety than I care to admit. I do believe that though money can't bring happiness, when you don't have it, it can absolutely hinder it greatly. Astronomy. Seeing the planets with your own eyes is an experience I will never forget. Watching the ocean at night in the dead of winter on a silent beach, I've never felt more connected to the history of everything than at those times. Traveling outside their country of birth.
How did your teen pregnancy go terribly wrong? When I was a teenager I got pregnant. My BF was older, 21, and wanted to marry me right away. However, my parents would not even let him see me, and instead he was only allowed to communicate through my mother. I became extremely sick and was hospitalized much of the pregnancy. BF was understandably distraught. He was very emotional, but the only person he had contact with was my mother. Somehow, not that I care how, that connection turned physical. Yep, mom cheated on my dad with the father of my baby. But then to make sure I never found out, they forced BF to return to his family, across the country. They concocted a whole story about how BF threatened to end me, so they forced him to leave our town. Oh, in the days that mom went missing while on her tryst, I was told BF kidnapped her and she went with him to save my life. I was young, I did not realize if that were true he would be in prison. I believed this story and at one point became so terrified of him, based on my mother constantly reinforcing that he wanted to hunt me down and end me and the baby. I gave my child up to an open adoption with a family I was really close to. I never wanted him to hunt her down. Her name was changed and they moved to another state. I moved the opposite direction and my mother knew I did it out of fear, and still let me. It was not until almost 7 years later that all of the truth came out, with my father devastated for his part, and telling me everything. I contacted previous BF and asked him to tell me what happened. He told me the same story I had recently come to know was true. He felt awful about the affair, but none of the threats or me needing give up my child over it was real. I reunited with my daughter. I will never speak to my mother again. She is truly gone to me. Even the last time I spoke with her, she tried to justify the nightmare she put on our family. What's the biggest meltdown you've witnessed? I was in high school and a new girl started halfway through the school year. I've no idea why, but from the first time she opened her mouth, the rest of the girls in her year were on her like a pack of dogs on a 3-legged cat. It was absolutely relentless. They tormented this girl 24/7. They would make fun of her weight, causing her to develop an ed. They would make fun of her black clothes and gothic attire. One girl swiped a sandwich near her wrist and said barcode scan complete. It didn't matter what she did, they'd find something to rip into her for. She was just a sweet, quiet kinda nerdy and gothic girl who'd been targeted for no reason. Well, one lunchtime, she was sitting on her own in the cafeteria, when the girls who bullied her decided that they wouldn't stand for the new girl silently eating her food, so they walked over, and knocked her drink over. She didn't react, and just carried on reading. So another leaned over and spat in her food. Again, no reaction. So the one who'd knocked her drink over snatched the book out of her hand, said something about nerd stuff and tore a bunch of pages out. The girl, without saying a word, sits perfectly still for a moment, takes her glasses off, calmly stands up, then grabs her tray and just beans the ever-living crap out of the book terror. I mean, this girl went skits. She kept yelling the whole time. Not even words, just yelling loudly and laughing. The others just stood frozen in shock, so she beans another one, then drops to her knees and just starts laying the smack down on the girl she just put into a deep slumber, screaming a torrent of four-letter words now. Despite being about 5'2" and 90 pounds, it took 3 teachers to drag her off, and even when they had her, it didn't stop her kicking one of the bully's front teeth out. She then smacked a teacher too. She got expelled for her actions.
Ex-husband and his new wife made a wooden, steel brace and forced my daughter to wear it. My daughter is 9 and we share custody by alternating weeks. My daughter says her back hurts now and her arm is tingling. I have a doctor's appointment for her on Monday, and in the meantime I am trying to remain calm. I confronted my ex-husband about it and all she would say was one text message where he said his new wife didn't like how my daughter slouched at the dinner table. They aren't doctors and there is nothing wrong with her that she needs a brace. I effing want to unalive both of them. Is there a way I can get a quick court date or see a judge because I don't want her going back there? When we divorced it took a long time to figure out custody. Update, I called into work while I was trying to get all this sorted. One of my coworkers has a cousin who is a lawyer and she knew someone who was able to help me and file the paperwork. My husband played dumb in court but his visits got reduced to supervised and he was ordered to take a parenting class. My daughter went to physiotherapy. Eventually the court reinstated his visitation when he swore he had learned his lesson and was sorry, and with his otherwise clean record the court agreed. I was against it but the court ruled against me. I gave my daughter her own cell phone so she could call me whenever she needed to. On her second visit it happened again. This time the brace had steel and fabric instead of wood and they took her phone too. The next night she left when they weren't looking and went up the street to a neighbor who was a police officer. The neighbor called paramedics and her co-workers. They had to cut the brace off my daughter. My husband and his wife were arrested. They got out quickly but they have been charged and their infant is with CPS. My ex lost visitation and custody and I'm working on making it permanent. Unfortunately my daughter's shoulder was dislocated from the brace. It set back her rehab and part of her arm is still numb and tingling. She needed surgery and is still recovering. She always played sports, especially at school, and did dance but the doctor thinks she won't ever be able to lift her arm all the way up again. I hate my ex and he'll see her again over my effing dead body. Right now I'm focusing on my daughter while my lawyer takes care of things.
Redditors who work at cemeteries and graveyards, what strange and scary stuff have you witnessed? I worked for a county cemetery department years ago. We would go to all the cemeteries in the county and mow or just do basic upkeep. Occasionally people, mainly farmers, would stumble upon some headstones in a field or a stand of trees and we would come out and prod the ground with dowel rods to find more headstones and re-establish the cemetery. Soon after I started working there we got a tip about some headstones a farmer found while clearing out a path through some trees for easier access to his field. It turned out to be the oldest cemetery in the county dating back to the 1700s. After investigating some of the names on the headstones it got really creepy. The story is that before the cemetery was there a schoolhouse stood there. The teachers were a husband and wife. It's not clear on what exactly happened but the students and the husband and wife all died in the schoolhouse. The information we found kind of made it sound like an illness of some kind and they were all quarantined in the school until they all died. After that the school was demolished and the students and husband and wife were all buried right where the school stood. So yeah, I'm sure it's haunted.
What secret product do you use that makes you more attractive? For the guys, let me put you on, this helped me get revenge on my cheating ex by getting with her best friend. I've always been a pretty shy guy but I am tall and had fluffy hair so I found myself with a girlfriend all throughout high school. Let's call her Amber. Amber with the dom in the relationship and I was the sub. She would boss me around and I never initiated anything in the relationship. She was the one who started talking to me. Looking back she just wanted me as a trophy boyfriend but I didn't realize at the time. I should also mention I have a good friend Brian who would dress better than me and was overall more confident. I would always see Amber talking to Brian in school. I once tried to confront her about it but before I could even finish she told me he's just a friend and I was just being insecure. I was too much of a bitch to push any further than that so I just let it be. One night I saw on my Find My iPhone that she wasn't home and was at a place that I'd never seen her before. I was already left undelivered for a couple hours so I decided to FaceTime her. She picked up after it ringing for a while and before I could even say anything I heard Brian's voice in the background say, "Who'd you say that was again?" I felt my heart sink as Amber covered her mouth but kind of smiling said to him, "I told you not to ask," before hanging up. I was in complete shock. I just stared at my ceiling for a while thinking of how much of a loser I was, before deciding I had to get my get back. I blocked her on everything and caved into the idea of becoming a fuckboy. I was going into my heartbreaking era. For the rest of the summer I focused on growing my hair out, tanning and buying jewelry, and this is when I found the most best combo of all time. Being tan with a white shell necklace. The shell necklace completely made my face pop out and made my snaps to other girls elite. When school started up, again I went crazy, talking to essentially all of the hottest girls at my school, but I had my eyes set on one in particular, Amber's best friend, Lily. Lily is a super bad brunette with curly hair and I began talking to her a lot. I eventually started hanging out with her in person and invited her over to my house. When she came we watched a movie and afterwards did the deed. I was a virgin, so I was nervous, but that didn't stop me from taking a video, hitting it from the back and sending it to Amber. A few days later Lily told me that they had a huge fight and aren't friends anymore, but I really don't care because Lily comes to my house every weekend and I still got girls waiting on me if she dips. Edit, for those asking where I got my jewelry, I got it all at pukalai.com. They use real shells in their necklaces and have pretty high quality stuff.
For more stories, head over to my YouTube channel, link in bio.
Every year I call up the police to see if they have any information on my brother. My younger brother went missing 20 years ago when he was 8. We lived on a big property that was fenced in. He was playing outside and just vanished. They searched high and low and put in a lot of effort. I feel beyond guilty because I was the big brother who could have watched him. Every year I call the investigators to see if they have any information. They tell me the same things. They had someone in mind but no evidence. That person is dead. I don't think he was responsible. I think someone took him off the property and out of town. They had dug the whole place up and found nothing. I miss him a lot.
Am I the a-hole for telling my husband that he has no say over our children? My husband and I have 3 kids: Emma, Zach, and Haley. Haley and Emma moved out this year. Emma went to college while Haley moved in with her fiancé. From the moment my husband found out that she was doing so, he did not approve, saying that he didn't think it was safe and didn't approve of her not going to college. Something that should also be known is that I had Haley from a past fling. Me and my husband were in an open relationship and I ended up getting pregnant and decided to keep her. Haley has never planned on going to college. She is a very free-spirited girl and wants to live her life and learn as she goes. I have never had a problem with this because that's how I was at her age, but my husband doesn't think it's appropriate for her to be this way. Things came to a head when my daughter Haley came to get the rest of the things from our house 2 days ago when I had happened to be at work. My husband works from home and was there when she came to get her things. What was told to me as to what happened is Haley walked in the house and went to her room, then my husband locked her in it. Haley started banging him on the door telling him to let her out, but my husband kept saying no, then that she needed to stay in there and rethink her ways and repent for her sins. Our family is in no way religious, so I don't know where this came from. I came home 3 hours later to find my husband sitting in front of her door with a chair and Haley screaming in her room. I immediately asked what he was doing and he looked at me with the calmest face and told me that he was making Haley rethink her decision. I immediately pushed him out of the way and opened the door. My little girl ran to me crying, saying that he had locked her in there for 4 hours and was telling her to repent for her sins. I immediately went off on my husband and told him he has no say on what any of our children do with their lives. They are adults and well capable of making their own decisions. Where I think I might be the a-hole, it is because I also said that Haley is not his kid, so he has no power over her whatsoever. He then started crying and said that maybe if I wasn't such a hoe then Haley wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be in this situation. He then left and hasn't been answering his phone or text messages. I don't know what to do here. Our marriage has been perfect up till this point, but I can't get over what he said and did to my daughter.
I helped a guy spy on his cheating wife. I received a very panicked call yesterday afternoon while I was sitting at my computer in my boxers sipping on some of that pod coffee. Hi, is this Marmalade Recording Studio? For background, I'm a self-employed audio engineer who mostly records local musicians out of my apartment studio, and potential clients, and as you'd imagine, are usually artists or bands who want to record their music. However, every so often I get other requests, such as recording audio for a local radio commercial, or being asked to improve recordings they have done themselves, such as in today's case. Hi, is this Marmalade Recording Studio? It's 4 p.m. and I am not much in the mood to record any new clients, but he proceeds to inform me he is outside the studio right now and just needs me to clean up some audio he recorded on his phone. I tell him that he can email it and I'll return it the next day, but that wasn't going to work with Joe here. He sounds desperate as he explains, I have been suspicious that my wife has been cheating on me with our neighbor. He proceeds to tell me how he started an audio recording on his phone, hid it in his bedroom, and left for work. When he returned later, the phone had recorded nearly 6 hours of audio. He got back in his car and sat in his driveway for a minute, composing and preparing himself, connected his phone to Bluetooth and began playing this recording, while driving around aimlessly. He says he thinks he is hearing his wife moan and potentially a male voice is in there as well and needs to the audio improved so he can be sure. He lives 2 hours south of me and said he got off the freeway and Googled recording studio and I was the first one that popped up. Geez, I can't say no. I tell him to stay, I'll come meet him outside and we'll get this audio cleaned up a bit. Joe here seems like a good enough guy, though very emotionally distraught. I'm filling up a glass of water for him before we sit at the computer. He's just giving that stare at the wall, that mindless stare, and I lead him into the studio room. He airdrops me the audio file, and sure enough it's 6 hours long. My immediate thought is I'll clean up the audio and I'll see in the waveform where it gets louder. He is just sitting there in disbelief. A few minutes later, after making the most awkward small talk, he asks me if anything is going wrong in my life, laughs, and clarifies that it'd make him feel better knowing someone else is going through a hard time. I'm really feeling for this guy and noticing a few loud parts looking at this file. He interrupts and says he can't listen and asks if I can just send him definitive proof that she is cheating on him. I don't need anything long, just maybe 15 seconds. That's probably all I could bear to hear. I tell him I'll return something tonight and that I won't charge him because, well, how could I? I make myself a drink after he leaves and I get another phone call. This time from a potential client who wants to discuss recording his band. These are my favorite calls and guarantees good money. 9 songs is the plan, and after our call he sends me a demo of one of his songs. Pretty good stuff, kinda bluegrass style. Simultaneously, Joe sends me a text thanking me. I hit play. It's mostly nonsense, the TV is going. Randomly I'm hearing a little girl in the background. He told me I might since they have a 2-year-old daughter. But after some time I stumble on something. I'm thinking this might validate his suspicions. It sounds like a woman, enjoying herself, along with a guy grunting. There it is. I send him this clip and I don't know what to add, so I just text, I think this is what you're looking for. I sit back down and continue my drink, loading up the song I was working before Joe called me in the first place. 2 hours go by and I get a call, and it's from Joe. I am hesitant to answer because I don't want to work anymore on this infidelity jam and I am not so much in the mood to be a shoulder to cry on. It seems to be a recurring issue in my line of work. But I answer. Hey, are you going to send me anything tonight? He asks. I'm a bit confused and tell him I texted him a while ago. He checks his phone and says he didn't get anything from me. My heart sinks, I know I sent that audio to someone. I tell Joe I'll send it right over. I'm dying to get off the phone to figure out who received a 15 seconds audio clip of screaming infidelities. Damn it. I sent it to the bluegrass guy. This guy sends me a cool demo and I replied with banging sounds. I decide I should probably follow up that text and I write to him saying whoops, wrong person, and I am just laughing my ass off, thinking that might smooth things over. I proceed to send the audio over to Joe. Then I remember Joe is likely going to be crying himself to sleep tonight. Bluegrass guy never responded and Joe wrote back 10 minutes later saying, thanks.
What song would you want to be played at your funeral? Closed casket, Pop Goes the Weasel. Good riddance. My grandpa had always looked at the bright side of life from Life of Brian at his funeral. I'd like something like that. Still Alive, from Portal.
The snobby rich kid turned out to be the coolest person I've ever worked for. I, 30 male, have a small moving company. My brother and I started the company and we have 2 employees. So we had a job to move everything from this kid's apartment to his brand new house. I guess he's some kind of finance executive whatever, but he was 22. We all got a cup of coffee and prepared for what we thought would be the worst client we'll ever have to deal with. So we knocked on the door of the apartment and a lady answered with a baby and said, "Oh, you must be the movers. My boyfriend is over at the house. I'll be out of your way," and went into what I thought was a baby room and shut the door. Strangers in the house, I get it, so we stayed away from her. So we loaded up the first truck and went to the address to see a rented pickup and a white Mercedes. I even laughed to my employee and said, "You ready?" Well, he answered the door and had cold Gatorades and snacks for us. He didn't even ask if we needed help. Bro just jumped into the truck and helped us carry stuff. So when the second truck came, my brother and the other employee had the same surprise to see this kid was actually pretty cool. Next it was like 1 p.m. and he said, "Hey, are you guys hungry?" And I said, "Yeah, we'll take a lunch if that's all right with you," and he said, "Oh no, it's on me. What are you guys in the mood for?" We said anything is fine and thanked him, and he ended up ordering from this Thai place. It was good. My brother later was carrying in this chair and he said, "I actually don't think I need that," and he ended up giving it to one of the employees. So after the job we all were like, man, he was actually a super nice guy. Today, about 4 days later, what made me make this post? I grabbed the mail and he wrote us a thank you letter and 4 gift cards, one for all the employees, to a local steakhouse. Lesson to myself, don't judge a book by its cover. What's your I hated that person, but they didn't deserve that story. When I first began freshman year in high school, I was bullied mercilessly by a junior. I have no idea why this guy hated me, but he did. He was bigger than me and stronger than me, and would push me around, call me names, make fun of other people if he saw them talking to me, etc. I'm old, and when I was in high school, if you told an adult you were being bullied, they'd tell you useless crap like just ignore him and he'll go away. That never worked. It got so bad I thought about dropping out of school, thought about self-mutilation. Didn't know how to deal. And then one day I get to school and see a couple girls he was friends with crying. See a couple teachers with very concerned looks on their faces. And then when homeroom starts, the principal gets on the PA and announces that my bully had been in a car accident and died the night before. He certainly didn't deserve to die. I wouldn't support the death penalty for bullying, but man, did my life ever change after he died. I finally started making friends. I could walk through the halls not worried about getting picked on. I really started to flourish academically. I got into a good college and now have a good career in life. I think there's a pretty good chance I would have dropped out of high school. And a smaller, but still real chance I would have committed self-mutilation if this kid hadn't died.
I'm going to marry her one true love. I, 29 female, was an affair baby between my mom and dad. My mom was already married to my stepdad and had my half-sister, 32 female, whose name will be R. R has always hated me for some unknown reason. I never gave her any reasons to hate me as we grew up together, she just did. Growing up I spent more time with my mom than my dad, who traveled a lot due to his work, but when he was in town I always took the opportunity. It was the only time I could be away from my stepdad and R. or would always do terrible things to me. She would destroy my things. Gifts and souvenirs my dad would send by mail would go to the trash. It was so bad that when I was going to enter high school, she cut off my hair when I was sleeping and I had to get a bob hairstyle which reached my chin. My nose of style. My mom scolded her and stepdad enabled her even more, patting her on the back for a good job when mom wasn't looking. In high school, I was in a graphic design class, and that's how I met ours one true love. At first greetings I didn't know. I would stay after school to finish my in-class assignments for that class, and he would be there to use the computers to do some drawing he had saved in the computer. The computer he used was right next to mine, so we sat together when I would stay. We spoke once, where he said he liked my hairstyle. I was the only girl in school with really short hair, so I did stand out a bit. One day my sister came to spy on him and she was furious seeing me sitting next to him. She was so mad that when we got home she slapped me on the face accusing me of wanting to steal him. After that incident I tried to stay away from him, not wanting to deal with her craziness. Thankfully I only had to endure her for another year before she went off to college. My first year of college my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer and was told he had that year, 2013, to live. My mother got news and told stepdad and R in response sent me a video she took from a TV show I've been told was called Shameless, where there's a blonde girl peeing on a man's tombstone with a text, saying, "Can't wait for that mother effer to be gone. Have fun cleaning the mess I'm going to make," where she sent another pic which was poop. I was so furious and disgusted that someone like her existed, someone who would be so happy to see someone's life end. My second year was rough as my dad died a few days before school started. In the end he left me with money that would help for the years to come and a few properties I rented to make extra cash, wondering if she did it. Yup. Sent another video for proof. Somehow I feel karma was real at the time. A few weeks after that I ended up bumping into the guy she was obsessed with, and still is, when I went to hang out with my friend who went to the same college as him. We spoke briefly until my friend came and we left. A few days after that my friend told me the guy she saw me with asked for my info and she gave him my Snapchat knowing if I didn't want to talk him she would give him an app I don't use anymore. I'm going to be honest, when she told me this I so wanted to use him and get back at my sister knowing how much she loved him, but I know how it feels to be hurt, and so I added him on Snapchat and texted him to meet me at a coffee shop. When we met at our local coffee shop I was honest with him on why I reached out and told him how crazy R is. He wasn't surprised. He went on telling me the things she would pull on the girls he would talk to and how she would try to sabotage his relationships when they were in high school, to her telling them they slept together while speaking or in a relationship with those girls. She was having his kid and even saying he had an STD. Yeah, she's nuts. To keep this short, we stayed friends until a few months where we starting dated. We had a lot of similar hobbies, interests, and we think alike. He says it's the power of mind meld, Star Trek, seeing how we might as well be telepathic with one another. This year we decided to get married, engaged for 3. Our jobs pay us really well in our respective fields where we can go big on our wedding. Now here comes an R sadly still stalks my fiancé. He isn't much a social media person so he doesn't post much, but when he does it's on his Instagram story. He recently posted a picture of my hand with the engagement ring captioning, "After 3 years next up the wedding ring," and yes, his Instagram is private and he has her blocked, but there are a few people who tell her friends and they tell her. It can't be helped, some people live for the drama. I don't talk to my mom as much seeing how she wasn't much help when my sister would bully me or when my stepdad belittled me, but I do once a month for a few minutes. She had called me complaining how I was throwing a tantrum about how Jay, my fiancé, was engaged and she doesn't know who the beach is. That's when I got the idea. I'm going to let her know who the beach was. Don't worry, Jay is fine with this. I had her blocked on social media and I unblocked her and made my Instagram public for this occasion. After unblocking her I posted a picture of my nails without the ring, my nails that were exactly the same as the picture he put on his story. A few days later I posted inspiration pictures of wedding invitations. Guess who's seen them? A few days after that I put a picture of myself with my friends dressed up with the caption, "My bridesmaids," and Jay a few hours later with his groomsmen with no caption, but we had the same background of the restaurant the picture was taken. And behold, I get messages on Instagram where she demanded to know if I was the girl Jay was going to marry. She said things like, "No, he can never like girl like you," and, "You know how much he means to me." I left her on read. Yesterday, I posted a picture of the two of us. The pictures were taken on Saturday where we took his family out to inform them of our wedding plans and how they are officially invited with invitation given to them. I posted 3 pictures. One normal one is when we first started dating, when he proposed, and the one on Saturday with his family with the invitation in the air as they surround us. Caption being, "Proud to announce I am getting married this year to the love of my life. Can't wait for a lifetime full of blessings alongside you." I got messages an hour after I posted that from R that I didn't read and calls from my mom which I declined. Today, I went on Instagram and saw over 80 messages of insults from her, one being how ugly I looked with my short bob hair which I cut for this occasion, which I replied, "Interesting, Jay doesn't think so. Funny actually. You know, Jay confessed to me after our second date that he thought in high school my Alice Cullen haircut as you described it before was the reason that grabbed his attention back then. He thought I looked very cute. Guess you did had a reason to feel threatened that time, as he found me attractive even then." After she read it I made my account private and blocked her. Now I'm thinking about doing it again when we're getting married or changing my bio to his last name, who knows. My insane mother-in-law destroyed my daughter's favorite books because she was scared of devil worship. Now my daughter is failing classes and it's all my mother-in-law's fault. She has really done it now. My mother-in-law has disrespected my family for the last time. There are some things you just don't do, like messing with someone's kid. My mother-in-law was visiting our house recently and while she was playing with my daughter she saw some books that made her gasp like it was the end of the world. My daughter has just started her first literature class in elementary school, and they've been reading Harry Potter, which I loved when I was a kid. Ever since my daughter was assigned to it, my wife and I have been reading it to her and watching the movies. We even went to the Harry Potter amusement park together. It's something really special that we share and we've had so many special moments because of it. I wouldn't trade those moments for the world. But when my mother-in-law saw the books, she said she couldn't believe we were letting our young daughter read something like that. I knew I shouldn't ask but I had to. After all, they're just kids' books. But my mother-in-law said they teach kids about dark magic and devil worship. At first I thought she was joking, but I looked at my wife and my mother-in-law was not screwing around. But I never thought she would do anything to make my daughter so sad. She has always been religious and has outdated opinions when it came to what people should do. When my wife and I were getting married, she refused to call us a married couple because she hated that we were both women. But guess what, lady, your family is gay. That night after she left, we went to grab one of the Harry Potter books to read to our daughter before bed, but they were all gone. We immediately knew what had happened, and of course mother-in-law is not answering the phone. Finally the next day she comes back with a box of shredded paper. It was obviously the Harry Potter books. She presented them all proudly to us like she'd done us this big favor. I just slammed the door in her face because what the female do you say to that? I did turn on the sprinklers on her as she was walking back to her car though. Ever since my daughter heard what her grandma did to her favorite book, she has been really down in the dumps. I mean, poor kid. What kind of grandma does that? Her grades have really been struggling since then and she never reads anymore. I think she has even been copying off of her friends so she doesn't have to do the reading. I feel like this was a real trauma experience seeing shredded pieces of her favorite books, and I don't know if she'll ever be the same again. Update. We took my mother-in-law off the pickup list for our daughter's school without telling her. After all, if she doesn't care about our daughter's education, she doesn't need to go to her school. But when my mother-in-law tried to pick her up from school anyway, they actually called the cops on her and mother-in-law got in trouble for yelling at one of the police. Serves her right though.
I think my girlfriend dumped me for saving another girl from danger. My girlfriend and I have been dating for almost 3 years. We moved in together recently and our relationship is great. She is an extremely loving and caring person. I was coming home from a gig late at night a few days ago when I heard sobbing behind a dumpster in an alley. I went to investigate, and a man was trying to force himself on a woman. He saw me and tried to take a swing at me. We got into a fight, and it got pretty brutal. I managed to beat him and force him down until the cops arrived. My face got bloodied badly, I broke a finger and cracked a rib. I was taken to the hospital after that, and my girlfriend rushed there. She was extremely worried and started crying when she was my face. I reassured her that I was okay, and she went home after looking after me for a few hours. She came to visit me after her job the next day, but she was very distant. She took care of me but didn't try to talk to me and only responded with one-word answers to my attempts to start a conversation. She's even avoiding looking at my face. She's been the same way even after I was discharged after 2 days and came home. She keeps avoiding conversations with me. What is wrong? She's never behaved like this before. What should I do? Did I do something wrong? What's the most evil revenge you've ever witnessed? My crazy, antisocial, elderly aunt lives in the mountains of West Virginia. My aunt is a mean, bitter old woman, who was suspected of taking the life of her ex-husband, but the cops could never pin it on her. Years ago, she bought a small home on some land that borders the land of another family in a small, narrow, isolated, forested mountain valley. The other family had been living there for a long time, and they just wanted to be left alone, like most people who chose to live in a remote mountain location in West Virginia. My aunt bought chickens and started to let them run around, unfenced on her property, and the neighbors' dogs were very interested in those chickens. The chickens would roam around, and go over onto the neighbor's property. One day, without warning, she took the life of her neighbor's dogs for eating one of her chickens, and only one of the dogs passed on her property. The other one passed in the neighbor's front yard. The neighbors had small kids and they loved those dogs. My aunt walked over with a baseball bat and told the neighbors that they had better never get another chicken-eating dog again or else they would be next. The neighbors didn't take too kindly to her taking the lives of their dogs, and her actions with the baseball bat, waving it around and threatening them, was over the top. But they didn't call the cops, knowing that my crazy aunt, who had a reputation for this kind of stuff, was unlikely to be arrested, and if she was arrested, she would just quickly be released from jail and be back. So a couple weeks later, when my aunt went into town, her home's back window was broken, and a bottle of burning oil and gas was thrown into her home. By the time the fire department finally arrived, the home was a complete loss, and every dog and possibly ex-husband-ending firearm my aunt owned, along with all her other worldly possessions, were incinerated. The home was a total loss, along with the chicken coop, etc. The neighbors didn't see nothing and the sheriff's department couldn't prove anything. My aunt had a long list of enemies. She didn't work and so was too poor and lazy to have homeowner insurance, so she had to move, and her son eventually bought her a cheap, run-down trailer in town. Those of us who knew my aunt figured she got what she deserved. Moral of the story: don't screw with a mountain man's dog.
I hatched a nest of hundreds of baby black widow spiders in my bedroom. This did, essentially, happen today. A couple weeks ago, my 5-year-old daughter found a black widow mom in her egg sac. She wanted to look at it, so I very carefully scooped it up into a jar, twisted on the top and went around it with duct tape for good measure. She begged to let them hatch so she could watch them, and this seemed to be decent science homeschooling, after which point I planned to put them in the freezer for a somewhat humane death. What's the harm, I thought? They are sealed up well. Well, guess what, they weren't. The jar I used was plastic and some toys had come in. There were small holes in the bottom and sides, barely visible. Smaller than a hole punch, but plenty big for a baby black widow. So today we're going about our lives, when she notices a tiny spider. I kill it. Then there's another. Then another. I start to think, oh no. I grab the jar to find the egg sac has indeed hatched, with hundreds of tiny little venom weapons. But I see with the relief the duct tape is still there, there's no way they could have gotten out. Until I look at my hand. In the moment I was holding the jar, one crawled onto my hand. At which point I noticed the holes. I screamed, said some words that definitely shouldn't be said in front of a 5-year-old, and wanted to fling away the jar but managed to hold on to it in fear that tossing it would further distribute its murderous contents. Now my child is playing outside while I furiously vacuum and clean and wash every surface. God have mercy. I thought I was showing my child some cool nature in action, and ended up with nature all over my bedroom, where nature means hundreds of baby black widows.
Today I screwed up by putting my school in hysteria by creating a mandatory PP inspection prank. I did not believe my senior prank would backfire on me as hard as it did, but here we are. This happened a couple of weeks ago, but it's too funny not to talk about. So I, 18 male, came up with the amazing idea to participate in the senior pranks in my school. There weren't many pranks being made at the school to begin with, so it was kind of a disappointing way to end the school year. For some background, my school has about 1,000 people in it, so it's relatively small. That also means word spreads incredibly quickly. This is also important. I came up with the genius idea to create a mandatory PP inspection that was going to be run by someone with the name of Dixie Normus and had it labeled as a graduation requirement. How did I come up with such a genius idea? The internet. More specifically, a Reddit post with a similar idea. I cobbled up the document on my school Chromebook, working on and off on it for the next couple of weeks. Adding a tweak here, editing a date here, changing the wording there, forgetting it here and there. Eventually I found my time to strike, and I was elated that some of my friends found it humorous and encouraged this prank to be done. Now the setup. I've been in the school theater club for about 3 years now. I've familiarized myself with the way it works and the way rehearsals usually work out. I found my opportunity to strike the 8 p.m. rehearsal days. I left for home, bringing a roll of scotch tape and the magnum opus that I created on my school Chromebook. I waited until rehearsals started and conjured my plan while I was tuning my guitars. I would wait until the 5-minute break before I strike on the unsuspecting school. So I did just that. A couple hours passed after the final bell of the day rang and I conveniently had to take a bathroom break. Additionally, it was extremely convenient that the baseball team had just left the bathroom in question, which gave me the impression that I would have something to fall back on if my genius plan did not go according to plan. I stood in front of the door, the restroom, unsuspecting on how I was about to defile it, and so I struck. Adrenaline pumped through my veins as I dug through my book bag, pulling out my folder and pulling out the roll of scotch tape and tainting the stalls with my product. After 1 short minute, my prank was complete. I walked out of the bathroom pretending to be oblivious to what had just transpired, and I kept it that way. The next day, I woke up to dozens of reposts of the supposed mandatory PP inspections that were supposed to happen at school the following day. It spread quickly among grade levels, the post being shared over and over again on different profiles, being exposed to different eyes each time. It got to a point where the school was alerted and then became a taboo topic to speak about. Any mention from that day about the PP inspection was met with scolding and threats of detention. Seniors and underclassmen were called down to the office by the number, only to be met with questioning about what had transpired. Here's where I effed up. Not only did I forget about the camera that's in the hallway in front of the bathroom, but the fact it was only the theater club and baseball team in the school, which narrowed the suspects down quite significantly. Did I also mention the day of the inspection was the day of the theater production? Nope. I did not. This amalgamation of not only's created quite the interesting scenario for the following day. I had slept in on the day of the show. My plan to show up during my last period to show up before we began to ready the equipment and leave enough time to touch up any areas that might be work. I woke up to various missed calls by one of my band members, telling me that I effed up and that I was in a lot of poop. One thing came to mind, the meat stick inspection. My bandmate had told me that I was at risk of getting kicked out of the show or even having the show cancelled altogether, a production that we had been working on for about 3 months at the time, and having my graduation revoked if measures were to be taken that drastically. He told me that the principal required me at school that instant and threatened me with various disciplinary measures. I rushed to school, frantically getting out of the house and sprinting down the sidewalk trying to get to school as quickly as possible. When I finally got to the school, I was greeted by the ever-so-friendly Ring doorbell summoning me to the office that instant. I timidly entered, trying my best to play stupid. I was being scolded for missing most of the school day. My moment of relief was quickly cut short by the piercing yell of my name down the office. My principal looked at me with a fiery scowl, eyeing me down across the room like a lion readying for its next kill. She told me to go on with my day and that we were going to have a pleasant chat after. My body was filled with terror for the remaining 3 periods. I trudged through the hallways with ice in my veins, terrified of the impending scolding later. Fast forward to the end of the school day, I was walking down the hallway when I heard my name being called on the intercom. My body froze, my heart skipped a beat, and my mind went numb for an instant. I had felt the cold hand of death on my very body that instant. Knowing very well this was self-inflicted, I had no escape as my legs walked to the office, my body wanting to run the opposite direction. It's funny. I walked with a pale face down to the office and was called down into the principal's personal office. The door slammed behind me and I stood before my principal, my stomach in my throat. She pulled out one of the inspection papers and slid it on the desk across to me. Do you recognize this? She began to read the first sentence and I could see the stern look on her face breaking slowly. She began to have a change of heart and wanted me to take accountability for it and realized that it was indeed a screw-up. I was allowed to participate in the show, as the lead guitarist, and I also am able to let this slide with little to no consequence, with the only notable punishment not being able to participate in a school barbecue the following week, which wasn't exactly world-ending to me, but all is well. People who've taken a leap of faith in their careers, what's your most shocking "I can't believe this is happening" moment? I was working as a software engineer at a well-established tech company. The job was stable, the pay was good, and I had a comfortable life, but I always had this nagging feeling that I was meant for something more. I had a passion for music and had always dreamed of making it my career. One day, I decided to take a leap of faith. I quit my job, sold my apartment, and moved to Nashville to pursue a career in music. Everyone thought I was crazy. I was giving up a stable career for a dream that had no guarantee of success, but I was determined. I spent my days writing songs and my nights performing at local bars and open mic nights. It was tough. There were times when I barely had enough money to pay rent, but I kept going, fueled by my passion and the hope that one day, I would make it. One night, after a particularly good performance at a local bar, a man approached me. He introduced himself as a producer and said he was impressed by my music. He offered me a chance to record a demo at his studio. I was stunned. This was the break I had been waiting for. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I recorded my demo, and the producer liked it so much that he decided to produce my first album. The album was a success, and I started getting offers to perform at bigger venues. I couldn't believe it. I had taken a leap of faith, and it had paid off. Now, I'm a successful musician, living my dream. It's been a wild ride, full of ups and downs, but I wouldn't change it for the world. It just goes to show that sometimes, taking a leap of faith can lead to the most unexpected and rewarding experiences.
My ex-husband's abusive wife called my daughter a spoiled bratty princess who needs correction and smashed the cake on her face. Now, my ex-husband is running back to me. My husband and I divorced when my daughter was 3. He then remarried with one of his co-workers, Marion, and they had a son. My daughter's birthday is in 9 days. I reviewed with my daughter things for her birthday, like the theme and the cake, but when we were going through the guest list, she looked anxious. When I asked what was wrong, she told me that she did not want to invite Marion. I asked her why and she explained to me that Marion would make weird comments sometimes around other parents or to her. For example, when Marion would pick her up from her dance lesson, she would hear Marion say things like, "That is why I prefer boys, girls only like pink and tutu," calling her a brat, and other things. She also told me that every time her brother would do something to annoy her, like breaking her toys, calling her names, or starting a fight, Marion would always defend her son and punish her every time and say boys will be boys. I asked about her dad and she said that she does that when her dad is around, but he is always in his office, so it is like a free pass. Later on, I called her father. He asked for the date of the party. Her real birthday is a school day. I told him that his wife was not invited and I think I was in loudspeaker because I heard Marion screaming at me saying that I was destroying her family, which completely makes no sense to me, so I hung up. I met my ex for lunch alone. I explained everything that my daughter told me. At first, he was defensive and told me that she was overreacting. I replied that even if that were true, his relationship with his daughter is at risk. I gave him a choice: fix the problem or I go back to court for more custody. Friday, when I came to pick my daughter up at his house, I talked to her in private, and she told me that her dad spent time with her, picking her up from school, helping her with homework, and playing with her. Marion then told me that she accepted not going to the party but still wanted to see my daughter blow out her candles on her actual birthday. She baked a cake and asked my daughter if she was okay with doing it before leaving. She seemed okay with it, so we gathered around the cake, my daughter, ex, and half-brother. When my daughter blew out the candles, her son decided that the good thing to do would be to smash my daughter's face into the cake. He and Marion burst out laughing while my daughter was crying. Marion then told her that she was being dramatic and emotional. We, ex, and I, got into an argument, and to my surprise, my ex-husband was on my side, saying that it was not okay. While arguing, I noticed that my daughter was not there, so I left to check on her. I helped her clean herself, and then we left for my house. I tried to cheer her up, but she was still a little sad. The party went well. Her dad came, and during the party, I told him that I wanted more custody because of his wife's bullying. A week later, he called saying that he was outside and said he wanted to talk. I let him in, and because I don't trust him, I recorded the whole conversation. He told me that since the party, he's been thinking about what to do and yesterday told Marion about my desire for more custody. From what he told me, she said that it was not such a bad idea because my daughter was not fitting into their family dynamic. They started to argue, and at one point, she just started cursing me and my daughter. Apparently, I am a sneaky B-word who is bitter about her affair with my ex-husband. She described my daughter as a spoiled, bratty princess who needs correction. And now, he has to choose between which woman he loves the most. This is where he had the click. He left the house, drove around, and then showed up at my place. He is going to stay at a friend's house to think about his relationship with Marion. Our daughter will stay with me during the week and visit him on the weekends. I told him that if he's going to get back together with Marion, I am continuing with full custody, but if they divorce, it will depend on his custody of his son because I don't want him around my daughter. He agreed.
Final, my fiancée of 4 years randomly claimed I abused her, and called the police. I spoke to her in person after I posted my update. From her perspective, her original idea was to make it look like she just got mad or something, grabbed a few things, and left for her friend's house, where she was going to have the party thrown. Her friend has a really nice house that's perfect for a 20 to 30 person get-together. She was with her 2 friends, and made an off-the-cuff remark when her friend said, "What are you going to say when he asks why?" And she said, "I don't know, I'll probably tell him that I feel like he got too serious when we had intimacy, or something like that." Then her other friend who was with her immediately took it to social media without the other 2 girls knowing, and then when they checked their phones later on that day, it was already a dumpster fire. I said, "Great, all that is understandable. Just one question, why did you then block me and then refuse to answer my calls, because that seemed pretty intentional to me." She said because she didn't want to throw her idiot friend under the bus, and thought it would all go away if she just threw the party, and she hadn't realized how far it all went so quickly. I thanked her for telling me, and then I called off the wedding entirely. She cried, I cried, it was a goddamn mess. She asked where we were going from here. I told her I don't know. I don't even know if the relationship is over yet, but I know that the engagement is over, and that if I decide to give it another chance, at the bare minimum, we need to build my trust for her from the ground up, if not the entire relationship. And now I have to decide if I want that. Do I want to spend another 4 years being undecided? If I'm being honest with myself, I imagine it taking another couple of years before I can trust her again. Do I want to get married and start thinking about having children at 35? 36? Close to 40? I told her that I have a lot to think about. I spoke to her dad last night. We shared a case of beers and had a conversation that lasted about 5 hours. My ex hasn't spoken to anyone, and has basically been locked up in her old bedroom for now. She's been crying a lot. I do believe that she's genuinely remorseful about all of this, which complicates things. Her dad caught wind of the situation on Facebook but learned what was really going on maybe like an hour later. He'd gotten my calls, but hadn't returned them because he called his daughter first. She told him, and he just didn't know what to say to her. He told me that she's not truly stupid, but that she has a history of sometimes not thinking about things before she says them, and the impact her offhand remarks can have. He said this is the worst it's ever snowballed, but she's had situations in the past where she says something stupid or insulting, and doesn't realize the impact of what she said until hours later when the other person blows up over it. So that's it. I still have a lot to think about. I know a lot of you guys are telling me that I have no balls for not literally tossing her out into traffic and laughing about it or something weird like that, but you have to understand that I still love her and have loved her for a few years now. Right now, I'm leaning toward moving on, but you're going to have to empathize with me here. As for my reputation, nobody thinks I'm an abuser. It's firmly out there now. Her reputation took a much more significant and lasting hit. I haven't lost any friends, except for the idiot social media girl, whose reputation also took a severe hit. Nobody called the cops, all the other posts about it have been deleted, everything is good. There's no real need for me to get a lawyer and sue anybody. My family agrees with a lot of you. They're 2 seconds away from slapping me upside my head for not immediately kicking her to the curb. Just give me some time. I'm not going to make another update post. Because I've already wasted too much of your time with this bull, but maybe I'll just update this post in a few days after I've decided what to do. My mother called me a female dog today. A little background, I live with my older sister and mother. My mom is an alcoholic. She would instead buy White Claw/beer and go out to party rather than spend time with us and buy groceries. The only condition she will buy us food is if we clean up, which makes sense because we can be messy, but it's annoying sometimes. My sister had a job but was recently fired, so unless I get the job I had an interview for, we are now fully dependent on our mother. So today, I spent a good couple of hours cleaning the kitchen so she would hopefully come home with food or give us some money to get it ourselves. She did not. I went up to my mother's room, and she was immediately annoyed because she knew what I would ask. I have to ask a lot for food because it's not consistent in my house. She started yelling at me, so I just walked out. I heard her call me a BCH 3 different times out loud. I have heard her call my sister a dirty, dumb BCH, in other words you should never say to your child. It was finally my turn and it hurt. Despite my mother being drunk, we can be really close. I could tell her anything. We were good up until now. My sister and I have always planned on having minimal contact when we move out, but now I know that is how it will be. I want nothing to do with her when I'm older. I am tired of the way she treats my sister. There have been many other situations where she has yelled, but she's never talked about me like that before. I am not her friend, I am not her enemy, I am literally her child. I don't understand why she would refer to me as a BCH. No matter how annoying I can be about food. I don't want to talk to her. I usually apologize after things like this, but I don't believe I should this time. I want to tell my grandma because she is the only person that would listen to me, but I know if I tell her, she will talk to my mom, and my mom will yell at me and call me a narc. I don't know why this is making me so upset. I have listened to her yell and call me lazy and annoying for years, but for some reason, this is making me really sad. I just can't believe she would call us any name but our own. I would never speak to her like that. She also said I was not allowed to go to Nationals Ultimate Frisbee anymore because I skipped school. It's finals week. I had no exams today and I won't have a single grade below a B. I doubt she'll really stick to that, but eek. What's the most embarrassing bathroom incident you've ever had? Went to Target one morning with my wife. Had to go to the bathroom, so I went in and did my business. It wasn't until I was done that I noticed there was no toilet paper in my stall. After making sure there was no one else in there, I ran over to the other stall which was out too. Again, after making sure the coast was clear, I waddled over to the sink to look for some paper towels. None. This was back in '99 before everyone had cell phones, so I waited in there for a while and eventually my wife opened the men's room door and yelled for me because I had been in there so long. Now, a smart man would have told her to get someone who works there to bring me a roll, but nobody has ever accused me of being very smart. At very least, I could have asked her to go in the women's room, get some, and toss it into me. Nope. She was so confused she didn't know what to do, so she just went along with whatever dumb idea I might have, and I had a dumb one. I had her check the women's room to make sure it was empty and then went running across the front of the store from the men's room to the women's room as fast as I could without pulling my pants up because I didn't want to get my underwear dirty. I just want to apologize to the Target employees who were working at the one in Myrtle Beach in early July '99 for having to see my poo-covered cheeks while I was flailing around the front of your store that day. The worst part of it all? We were there on our honeymoon. Amazingly enough, we're still happily married 22 years later. My wife tried to unalive me using hot sauce. My wife, 25, put hot sauce in my 30 nose while I was sleeping. My wife and I have been together for 5 years, married for 3. Our son is 3 years old and she has another son who is 7. I love the older one as my own and am very close to the kids. However, things have been taking a strange turn since we got married. She has been doing things that she thinks are funny, but it's been getting more and more dangerous every time. It started with pinching me or playfully pushing me, but a few days ago, I was in the kitchen doing dishes and she came behind me and started talking to me about my day. I was talking to her and, while talking, I turned around and she took my baby son's dirty poopy diaper and rubbed it on my face and started laughing. Not to be too gross, but I could actually taste it. I tried to talk to her, but she said I can't handle her humor. Last night, I came home after an 18-hour shift at the hospital, exhausted and lethargic, and went straight to bed without eating anything. She was also in bed, so I gave her a kiss, and fell asleep. I suddenly woke up feeling my nose and brain were on fire, and she was holding my baby's Tylenol syringe and laughing. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up. I was in agony and never felt like this before. I felt that I was literally going to pass out from pain. I left the house and booked a hotel room, and I'm still here in the hotel room not knowing what to do. I don't want to leave my children with her, but she is a completely different person around people, and will somehow make me the bad guy. She loves our kids, but I don't know if one day she will act towards them this way as well. What should I do? Should I just leave her and risk losing my kids as well? Men who have had an abusive wife or girlfriend, what did you do to get out of it? I dated this girl for over a year because I just couldn't figure out how to get rid of her. She was insanely jealous, and any discussion of my unhappiness in our relationship just brought accusations of cheating. These inevitably led to punching and kicking. I never really felt like I could fight back. Any action to defend myself would probably have ended with me getting arrested. She was much smaller than me, so most police would most likely take her side. I was trapped. Eventually her father came to visit. The first time he and I were alone together, he immediately asked if I was okay. He said he knew how she could be. This confused me at first. I barely knew him and didn't know if I could trust him. Just told him everything was fine. It had been for a few weeks. He stayed a few days, and by the end of his visit I could see he was just a cool dude who knew his daughter had issues. A couple months later I reached my breaking point. I was miserable. I just wanted her out of my life. I looked in her address book for his number and called. I told him I couldn't take it anymore and was trapped unless I defended myself with physical force. He sighed and said, "Can you hang on till Thursday?" He told me he'd make the 8-hour drive to my house if I could wait a few days. On Thursday afternoon we were standing in the kitchen when there was a knock on the door. She answered, surprised to see her dad. "What are you doing here, Dad?" He just shrugged and stared at me. I blurted it out. "I'm breaking up with you." "We're done." She charged at me with clenched fists, but he was ready. He grabbed her from behind and put her in a full Nelson hold. She was dragged like this across my driveway and thrown into the backseat of his car. The last time I saw her she was trying to kick out his rear window as he drove away. There's a good possibility I may owe my life to that dude. I feel really bad for him. She was otherwise a wonderful person, but if she lost her temper, look out. Hopefully she found help. Have you ever stabbed someone in the back? When I was in high school I was totally in love with this girl, all 4 years, crushing on her hard. I'll call her Jen. I tried to take it somewhere, but in all honesty, I was an overweight geek and a smoker and probably wouldn't have dated me if I were her. But, we did end up becoming friends, and I subjected myself to letting Jen vent about her boyfriends and all that. It was miserable. My junior year of high school we went to prom together as friends only, and I thought it was maybe my night to make something happen. Instead she spent all night hanging out with other people, leaving me to my own devices. So senior year comes around, and a really cute girl who was in my circle of friends asked me out to prom. I was flabbergasted. No girl had ever asked me out before, let alone to the biggest high school event aside from graduation. Not only was she cute, but we had a lot of the same interests, taste in music, all of that. Of course I say yes. So, 2 weeks until prom and Jen approaches me and says she doesn't have a date to prom and will I go with her, as friends? And I say yes. I cowardly tell the cute girl I couldn't go with her by asking her friends to tell her. She never talked to me again. Prom night rolls around. Jen looks great. Everyone is having fun. We are going to Jen's summer home after the prom to stay overnight along with 4 other prom couples. And we go to prom and she immediately ditches me to go dance and have fun with other people and ignores me the entire night. Every time I try to get some time with her she tells me she is sorry that she isn't feeling well. I ended up not even going to her summer home after. She took some other guy. I went to a friend's and got horribly intoxicated. Woke up in hospital facing assault charges but eventually got away scot-free. Happy ending to the story though. The cute girl who I treated like crap married her dream guy. Still feel like shit about it though. Leaving 5 minutes early is too much? Okay. First time poster to this sub. I'm going to preface this by saying I know leaving 5 minutes early is sorta a privilege, but I had gotten approval for this from my manager and her direct boss. I leave 5 minutes early to catch an earlier train that will get me home 40 minutes earlier than the next train. I had informed my boss and her boss if this 2 weeks prior to me actually starting to take the earlier train and both said yes. I've been taking this train since January. Fast forward to today and all of a sudden my manager tells me I cannot leave early anymore because she has gotten in trouble for it, which I found weird because both her and her direct boss had given me the approval already and it's been good for months with no issue. I then found out from a coworker that a higher up in a totally different department happened to catch wind that I was leaving 5 minutes early and told my manager to stop letting me leave early because I'm not special and shouldn't be able to leave early to catch a better train for myself. What really is the kicker here is that I come in 10 to 15 minutes early every day and I am never late, but apparently 5 minutes is too much of an ask, so instead of leaving 5 minutes early I am now leaving 15 minutes later, which doesn't affect me in any way because the next train doesn't come for a while. So now I'm racking 2.5 hours about every week between the time I come in early and stay late for pretty much no downside on my end because I'd spend that time waiting at the station regardless. After he leaked my pics, I trashed his 14+ years of effort, leaving him with nothing. My boyfriend and I had met online well over 6 years ago through an online game by the name of RuneScape. He was 14 and I was 17, but it had felt like we had been friends forever. We both played the game very often and connected through it, eventually leading us to start a long-distance relationship. Things began to escalate as the years went on and we began seeing each other in person every few months or so. We were about 1,500 miles apart, so one of our main priorities for the future was moving in together and closing the distance. My job had prevented us from doing that, but we had finally set a date for me to move in with him in December of this year. Our relationship never had any serious issues and I was more than happy to have him in my life as he was happy to have me. As I got older I began to play RuneScape less and less as work took up most of my time. He continued to play regularly, if not more than he had when I first met him. He could never really hold down a job and barely had an income, but I supported him throughout the years and even paid his rent from across the country after he moved out of his parents' house a few years ago. I never really minded it because he was a sweetheart, but we began to have problems in November of last year. I couldn't help pay his monthly rent, I was short on cash after having to pay my own living expenses alongside car repairs and bills I owed to the state, and I just couldn't afford to support him at the time. When I called him one night to discuss it, he freaked out and started crying that he didn't want to live with his parents again. I tried calming him down and even suggesting that I could help him find a temporary job until I could start providing for him again, but he wasn't having it. He claimed his parents would abuse him if he returned home, which I know for a fact isn't true because he and his parents have stayed with me several times. They've given him the world. I eventually did calm him down, but he remained passive-aggressive the entire night, and we eventually hung up. Because I cared about him, I reached out to his father the next day and informed him that he would probably be moving back home after his lease expired that month. I explained how I wouldn't be able to afford paying for his living for a month or two, and if there were any local jobs he could work in order to, make an income. Apparently, a friend of his father needed help managing a small warehouse for his business and was looking to potentially hire my boyfriend for the season. It paid $15/h and was super easy lifting boxes, sweeping the floors, and taking inventory. I brought it up to my boyfriend that same night and he was not having it. Not only did he not want to work in a shitty warehouse, but he didn't want to work at all. All he planned to do day in day out was play RuneScape. I brought up a few other job listings I had found in his area and he immediately shot all of them down as well. He then had the audacity to comment about how he thinks I should work harder and possibly work a second job. I kept my composure and simply argued against it until we eventually hung up. I collapsed on my bed and cried for a good hour or two afterwards because of the intense emotional stress I was under. Not only do I work 8 hours a day, I'm also an industrial meteorologist if I remember correctly. That's a lot more work than playing RuneScape every day and using my Hulu account. I really considered breaking up with him right that moment, but I changed my mind and decided to give him another chance. Looking back on it, it was a big mistake. I messaged him throughout the night and we sort of made up, but I was still a little uneasy about the entire event. He had moved back with his parents by the time December had come, and I began to help him look for jobs while he wasted his life away playing video games. I eventually persuaded him to start working at a small retail store near his house, and he thankfully began to make some money. I would still buy him video games and transfer him money like normal because I spoiled him, and our relationship began to feel somewhat okay again. Last month, both Ham and I put our money together to fly him across the US to stay with me for 4 days. We hadn't seen each other in person since last summer, so we were both looking forward to it. He arrived and we had a great time for the first few days because he could actually take me on dates for once with his new income. Everything was perfect until I caught a glimpse of his phone's lock screen while he was taking a shower. "When are you gonna leave her?" The Discord message read. I could have ran into the bathroom and snapped his neck at that moment, but I kept myself together as best as I could without killing him. I had never felt so used, disrespected, or hated in my entire life. When he came out of the bathroom, I gave him a fake smile, but I genuinely hated him from that moment on. He could have dropped dead on the floor and I would have spit on him. I spent the remainder of the night watching him play RuneScape and I remained very quiet. He took notice of this and asked me if everything was okay, and I lied and told him I was fine. When it came time to go to sleep, I let that fucker climb into bed with me and he tried initiating sex. Because it was our final night together, I rejected as politely as I could without tearing his member completely off. He was disappointed, but went out like a light. Immediately after he went to sleep, I reached over and unplugged his phone and started digging through his messages with that girl. I fear that I had misinterpreted the message I had seen, but I was completely right after all. Not only had he been cheating on me, he had been doing so for nearly 6 months, leading me to believe that he hooked up with another girl directly after. I couldn't pay for his living in November. I scrolled through and wanted to vomit my insides out by the end of it. After he leaked my pics, I trashed his 14+ years of effort, leaving him with nothing. I scrolled through probably 100,000 messages and wanted to vomit my insides out. By the end of it he had talked shit about me, claimed I was emotionally abusive just as he had done with his parents, and even sent this girl my nudes so they could pick me apart physically. When morning came, I had slept in because of how late I was up reading his messages. I woke up to find him on my computer playing RuneScape and eating my food. It was like all of our relationship had been wiped from my mind and he was now an evil stranger sitting in my house. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tear him apart and kick him out of my house onto the street, but I didn't. In fact, I gave him as much love and attention as I could muster that morning because I wanted to leave things feeling normal between us. I dropped him off at the airport and we had a quick and somber goodbye before I left him forever. Unbeknownst to him, I drove back home as calmly as I could before crying my eyes out in a mix of complete anger and emotional pain. I ended up kicking my bed frame so hard that the wood split and I had to buy another one recently. If only it were his face. I wanted to break his heart by the time he arrived back home, but I wanted it to really hurt. I logged into our joint RuneScape account that we had made several years ago, where he and I would work on training the same account and raising it almost like our baby. We had always joked that if we were to ever split up, he would take half of the account's bank contents and I would take the rest. I took my half and transferred it to my main account before taking his half and giving it away to random people throughout the game. Every last bit of it. Even items I couldn't normally trade away. I used a spell to convert the items into coins, which I then gave away as well. The bank was now empty. It then occurred to me that I had the credentials to his main account written down on my desk, as he would frequently have me train his farming skill every so often. I didn't hesitate at all and logged into his precious account. I immediately took all of the contents of his bank and sold it all on the Grand Exchange, a marketplace in the game. It took an extremely long time to clear out his bank, but he would still be flying home for about another 4 hours, so I had plenty of time. By the time I had sold / and destroyed everything, I had 4 stacks of coins totaling over 8.5 billion. Now what to spend it on? I wanted to waste his life earnings on the most useless stupid thing I could think of besides him. I logged back into my main account to reach out to a friend of mine that collects massive stacks of burnt food. For the unaware, burnt food in RuneScape has no use. You can't unburn them, eat them, or even sell them on the Grand Exchange. They are, however, tradable amongst players. I've always poked fun at this guy for collecting burnt food, but I was now more thankful than ever to make his acquaintance. In my revenge, I asked him what the most obscure unwanted item of the burnt food variety was and he replied burnt spider. Lo and behold, he had roughly 6,000 of the item spiders on the shaft burnt in his bank that he was willing to sell me. Feeling generous with my ex-boyfriend's coins, I gave my friend a full stack of 2.147 billion coins and left a very happy customer. I dropped the 6,083 burned spiders in his bank, but still had about 6 billion coins left to spend. With the remaining money I decided to treat myself. I went on to the Grand Exchange and ended up going on a shopping spree. The first thing I bought were 100 bonds. If you're not familiar, a bond in RuneScape grants you 14 days of in-game membership. After trading all 100 bonds to my account, I now have almost 4 years of membership paid for me. I spent a majority of his coins on extremely nice armor and weapons, all of which went straight into my account. He still had about an extra billion, so I spent it on the supplies I needed to level up an expensive skill of mine. By the end of the afternoon, he was left with a measly all of which I gave away to a guy cooking pizzas outside of the exchange. Nothing was left, so I decided to pick up a pile of bones off the ground and leave it solely in his bank. It might sound petty, but I laugh for a while now. I know what you're thinking. This is so cruel. You ruined the tens of thousands of hours he had put into a game. Well, it was time he learned that I can be a bitch. A mean bitch. On top of spending every last coin he had ever made, I leveled his defense skill. This may not sound bad. In fact, it sounds like a good thing. I helped his account progress, right? Well, no. Unfortunately for my ex, he had what players commonly refer to as a pure account, meaning he never ever dared to level his defense skill from level 1 in order to keep the lowest defense stats but have high offensive stats. Well, not anymore. Have fun with your permanent level 6 defense. Cycling through hundreds of possible forms of revenge in my head, I settled on getting rid of his house. It's quite an achievement in RuneScape to have a nice house of your own. In fact, he had one of the nicest I had ever seen in the game. In order to have built it, he must have spent well over a few billion coins. Too bad I had disassembled it all in a matter of minutes, deleting it all into cyberspace. And there's no insurance either. He's going to have to rebuy everything with his non-existent money if he wants a new house. Bye-bye Casa the Cheater. Scrolling through his friends list, I decided to act as him and pay a visit to his friends who were currently online and admit that I had cheated on my girlfriend and was fully proud of it. If his friends hadn't removed him by that point, I removed them. All of them. Lastly, to add a beautiful little cherry to this revenge-filled cake, I changed his username. You're able to change your username once a month on RuneScape, so I changed this to let everybody know that he's a dirty cheater. I obviously won't drop his username here, but I did the best I could to embarrass him. With a 12-character limit, he should be able to reclaim his previous username in about 3 weeks, but if he waits too long, I'll be able to swipe it and slap it on a throwaway account of my own forever. He sent me a very hateful and aggressive message later that night, followed by pictures of him crying. I wrote him a sincere message, officially ending the relationship while also scaring him away by threatening to take him to court over sharing my nudes and possibly filing a cease and desist if he were to contact me anytime soon. I don't plan on doing any of that. I just don't want to speak to him ever again. After he leaked my pics, I completely trashed his, leaving him with nothing to show for but a shameful username. Edit: wow, I really didn't expect this to blow up as much as it did, lol. To clarify, this post is referring to old school RuneScape rather than RuneScape 3. We met playing RS3, but immediately put all of our focus into old school when it first released. He even transferred 90% of his RS through bots and such, making this revenge even sweeter. So while his old school account is only his fortunes with a collective effort of the previous. What's the most brutal comeback you've ever heard? When my younger brother was about 13, I noticed he had come home from school with a bit of a black eye and I asked him how he'd gotten it. He wouldn't tell me what had happened and I thought he seemed a bit ashamed when I asked him about it, so I assumed he'd lost a fight and I left it alone. A few weeks later, I heard what had happened from one of his friends who witnessed the event. There was a kid named Joe who went to school with my brother who he'd known since he'd started primary school at about 5 or 6 years old. Now Joe was a bit of a jerk, his father had died at a young age. I suspect this was why Joe was always quick to fly off the handle and had a hard time fitting in. He had a reputation for winding people up and generally being a pain in the ass when he was around. My mom was friends with his mom, and I knew that Joe was usually a good kid at home, but acted out because he lacked support, and I know he still took his dad's death pretty hard. He would run his mouth about anything or anyone that he wanted to, but he usually wouldn't resort to actual violence. A few days before the incident, our father had just gotten a bonus from work and bought himself a sleek new sports car which has a bit of a feminine look to it. Joe had decided to choose this as his ammo for having a laugh at my brother's expense on the bus ride home. Joe said, "Hey, does your dad do his nails and style his hair? He's driving a girl's car." My brother replied with, "What does your dad drive, a coffin?" When I asked my brother about why he lost the fight, he told me he was so ashamed after he said it that he just took the beating out of guilt. Can the police lawfully stop you to see if you are okay, even though they have no reasonable suspicion that you have, will, or was breaking any law? Yes, they can. It is actually considered a welfare check. I had it happen to me. My mom had serious heart issues and was in the ICU. I had gone to work as normal and, as normal, called to check on her during my first break. She had passed 5 minutes before I called. I found out the hospital had been trying to contact me for an hour. I walked back into the building in shock and had them page the supervisor, who sent me home. On the way home I was not really paying attention to my driving. I went through a town that is halfway to my town. I live 30 miles from work, and saw lights in my rear view mirror. Pulled over and waited for the officer to come up. Turns out he saw me driving slow and crying, so he wanted to check that I was okay. I explained the situation and he stayed with me about 15 minutes until I composed myself, then followed me to the city limits. When I got to my town, there was an officer there that followed me home, then got out to check on me. The officer in the first town had radioed a friend, who told the officer on duty the situation. I won't forget them doing that for me. It will be 4 years on July 1st. What's something your gender does that the opposite gender never even thinks about? A lot of men try very hard to not seem like creeps or pervs, whereas I've never heard of any woman making any similar effort. For example, I am currently at the beach. Literally, I am sitting in a chair in the sand about 15 feet from the Atlantic Ocean. There are about 40 other people within eyesight on this beach, including a group of teen girls to the right of me who've been taking bikini selfies for about 2 hours. They're hard to ignore, because they're doing weird poses and giggling a lot. To the left, there are more women in bikinis. They're sunbathing, so I'm making a point to keep my eyes on my laptop, the book I'm reading, or the ocean in front of me. I hesitate to look left or right, lest I get accused of being a creep. But, there are also a lot of scantily clad men out here too. The women around me seem to have no problem staring at these guys. Older women, younger women, it doesn't matter. When a shirtless guy jogs by, it happens a lot. There's a Marine base near here. Some of these women are downright shameless in their gawking. Imagine if a guy did that to a woman running by, especially if that woman was a generation younger than them. They'd be driven off the beach by an angry mob, accusing them of being a pervert. Yesterday, I was sitting on the deck overlooking the ocean, using my binoculars to scan the horizon. I was looking for dolphins or boats or whatever I could see. But, as soon as a family with teenage girls showed up on the beach, I put the binoculars down. Seeing a dolphin isn't worth the risk of being thought of as a possible creep. My shameless wife continually goes out for the night and doesn't come home. So, I'm going to serve her divorce papers. We've been married about 5 years. Over the course of our relationship there have been 20 plus times where she went to a friend's house and just didn't come home. I understand things happen, but it weighs on me as I'm up all night wondering where she is, who she's with, and if she's safe. We have 3 kids to take care of. Honestly, some of it on my end has to do with trust and I'm aware of that. There have been 2 incidents where I found out she was talking to another guy, a different ex-boyfriend each time. Once through Snapchat that I accidentally saw, and once when the guy's girlfriend reached out to me to tell me that they had been talking behind my back, and meeting up. She swears nothing happened, but it's hard to maintain trust. Another incident, she admitted she went out to the bar with some of her friends and some guys, and I've heard rumors that she cheated on me with one of them that night, but she adamantly denies this. Some of the times she didn't come home, I couldn't reach her at all. If I kept calling, she would eventually answer and be angry with me for blowing up her phone and not trusting her. Told me I was embarrassing her. In my mind, it's 3 a.m. and I can't sleep not knowing where my wife is, and I have 3 kids to take care of in the morning. This is all compounded with other circumstances that I won't dive too much into, but she hadn't pulled this in a while and she did last night. I take the kids every Friday night so she can go hang out with friends. She went to a friend's house that I knew for game night. 11 rolls around and I'm going to bed, so I call her to see when she'll be home so I'm not worrying. She tells me she's not with those friends anymore, and went over to a neighbor of those friends that she just met to hang out there and have drinks. She says she didn't drink that much, which I'm not overly worried about. I just didn't even know she had left the place I knew she was at. She asked if she could stay until midnight, to which I said yeah, no problem. I fell asleep, woke up at 2:30 a.m. She still wasn't home. I called her to see where she was and she said she was still there. I got upset by this because I don't even know these people and neither does she, and she promised she'd be home by midnight. She still didn't come home. I fell back asleep and woke up again at 5 a.m. and she still wasn't home. I flipped out. She promised she would stop doing this and continue to do it. I've had a long week and now I've been up all night worrying about my wife and now have to handle the normal responsibilities while she is sleeping. I don't even know where she is. She thinks I'm in the wrong for getting angry as she's a grown woman and shouldn't have a curfew. I think she's in the wrong for not telling her husband what she was doing, and then not coming home when she said she was, keeping me up all night worrying. If this was a one-off thing, I'd be understanding, and I have been in the past. I'm not sure I can keep doing this though. I definitely lost my poop. Exhausted. Happy to clarify anything. And sorry for the long post. Am I overreacting? I guess you make excuses for the ones you love, and that's easier than accepting your marriage is failing. I've done all I can to provide a good life for these kids, and never wanted to do anything to jeopardize that. I will be taking action this time. Already talking to a realtor. Have lawyer calls lined up for Monday and am working out childcare arrangements. I will not be bringing any of this up to her so that I can build my case.
I wish my husband would cheat on me. I, 28 female, have spent every day for the past year wishing my 27 male husband would cheat on me, so I had a ballot out. I hate being married. My husband would rather spend time with his brothers and parents than with me. We've been at his parents' house for the past 3 weekends. Once we leave there, he gets on video games with them until all hours of the night. I haven't been to bed with my husband in weeks. Lovemaking is non-existent in my marriage right now. It's not just about the lovemaking. He complains about me all the time, to my face and behind my back. I've overheard him telling people that I'm annoying or that I nag a lot. I don't feel like I ask more than any other wife. I don't get home until past 7 most nights because I have to pick up the kids. And I don't ever ask him to pick them up or to make dinner. I ask for him to help clean up the house, and to help me put one of the kids to bed. He only willingly put one of the kids to bed. My house hasn't been clean in months. He just will not do chores. He ran out of clean underwear a few weeks ago and told me it was my job to do laundry, essentially blaming me. The man also refuses to take care of himself. He complains when I cook because I'm trying to cook healthy meals, and he doesn't like vegetables. He won't go to the gym with me, but instead insists on playing video games. Obesity runs in his family, and I'm trying my best to encourage a healthy lifestyle change. I know he's depressed, but he won't talk to someone or get on medication. It doesn't matter how I try to encourage him, he would just rather suffer. All this to say, I don't feel like it's a good enough reason to get a divorce. I'm unhappy in my marriage, but it can be fixed. Both parties be willing, of course. He's just not willing. I just wish he'd cheat on me so I felt like I had a valid reason to get divorced. At this point, it wouldn't even hurt me that much. Why won't my boyfriend propose? So, I've been going steady with my boyfriend for like 3 whole years now. We even moved in together more than 2 years back. Things have been super awesome between us. To me, it's like the perfect relationship. We've totally helped each other become better people. He was all about introducing me to his folks after just 1 month of us dating, which was a big deal because he never did that before. Now, I even know his family well too. They're awesome, and I think they like me too. But here's the part that's been bugging me. We've been talking about marriage for ages, and we both agree we're in it for the long haul. But he hasn't popped the question yet. I brought this up and he said, let's wait till you graduate college before we tie the knot. But couldn't we at least be engaged? Being engaged feels like a promise to get married, and it's weird to me that he doesn't want to make that promise yet. It stings when I see other people my age jumping into marriage and engagement after, like, no time at all. I shouldn't let it bug me, but it does. I just want that promise, that sense of direction. I tried talking to him about it, explaining how engagement isn't like a rush to the altar. He's saying it's not the right time financially, even though he's been working and earning decent cash for over a year since he graduated. He's saying he can't afford a fancy ring. I've been having this same conversation with him for months, and he keeps harping on the money bit. But he can swing a simple ring. He knows I'm not into flashy stuff. Mind you, he's the one footing most of the bills and rent for our house because I'm juggling full-time school and a part-time job. I'm just head over heels for this guy. I know he feels the same way. He's always showering me with affection, cute little presents, and taking care of me. He's totally putting his all into this relationship. He says I don't need a ring pronto to know we're in it for the long ride. He knows I'm feeling jelly seeing our pals getting hitched and all, and he's not a fan of that. He tells me not to compare a thing with others. He's got faith in us and our future together.
My friend is a psychopath. There were lots of red flags. He was definitely closeted bi, which is fine, but his behavior wasn't. The main red flag is that he had a slew of ruined relationships in his wake. He was a college theater professor and had a pattern of behavior in which he would identify young men in the department who were emotionally vulnerable, often who'd had recent girl trouble and had no current male role model/father figure. Many of them had issues with their dads or their dads were deceased. He would then start spending time with them and love bombing them until they thought they were his best friend. He fed on adoration. I don't even think he exploited all these guys for sex, though he probably did some. He just got off on people adoring him. When they started showing interest in other people, he'd go hard on the discard. There was a pattern of subtly putting these guys down and then building them up so they were conditioned to please him. If he got bored, he threw them aside. He once told me he viewed all his interactions with people through a caricature he created of them. For example, a black friend of ours was the loud black woman. Another friend who'd lost his dad recently and suffering severe depression was Eeyore. He was incapable of self-reflection. If he knew he'd upset you, he'd apologize, but it was always empty. He could not reflect on his actions and actually accept accountability for wrongdoing. He was a budding alcoholic and would attend lectures and rehearsals drunk, then laugh about it later like it was some kind of inside joke. He was a liar. The man was pushing 40 trying to convince these college-aged men he was in his late 20s so they'd hang out with him. He didn't care about your boundaries. At his house he'd regularly expose himself as a joke and acted confused when I didn't find it funny. As one of these guys he love bombed and emotionally manipulated, I eventually wised up and realized that my relationship with him was not healthy, and that it was not acceptable for him to have the emotional relationships he was having with his fucking 18-year-old students. I cut ties and he went from love bombing to resentment so fast. Later on, my wife and I were visiting some friends who were also friends with him. They'd known him longer than we ever did, and let him stay in their guest room for months when he lost his living arrangements during COVID. They eventually kicked him out and cut ties too. Then they told us they had recently run into a former high school classmate of his who said, "I'm so glad you got away from him. There is something wrong with him. He's dangerous." Have you ever had a bad gut feeling about someone that was right? It happened when I was 14 or 15. My devoutly religious parents insisted I attend Sunday church services with them. It was one of the non-negotiable rules of our household. I hated it. Of course, back then I kinda hated everything. One reason I hated going to church was Pastor Bob. I did not like the man. I wouldn't have been capable of explaining why, but I had a strong aversion to him. He was arrogant and he looked down his nose at us. Even then, I sensed that he had control issues, but I didn't have the vocabulary to express this to my naive, trusting parents. Pastor Bob had an inaccessible, authoritarian air about him, and people responded to him deferentially. He even had an inner circle of followers who fawned over him, which I found inappropriate for a supposed man of God. He acted like he was God. He just seemed more cult leader than a spiritual guide. I didn't like the pastor's wife either. She was cringy, all fake smiles and God-fearing respectability. She'd swan around the church beaming at her husband, clinging to him, so proud of her man like she'd struck gold with him and couldn't believe her luck, while he treated her almost dismissively. I dunno, everything about this couple just screamed bad energy. The adults in the congregation, however, all adored the pastor and his wife, they clung to his every word. How did they not see what I did? My parents, meanwhile, wouldn't hear a word against the pastor and accused me of being hateful and unforgiving towards people. They weren't far wrong, to be fair. I was a grumpy teenager with a bad attitude. But that doesn't mean I was wrong about the guy. Fast forward 30 years and I'm now living abroad. For some bizarre reason, this pastor's name suddenly sprung to mind one afternoon. I hadn't thought about him since I'd left home decades earlier. So out of idle curiosity, I looked up his name online. Now, I didn't like this guy, but I would never have imagined how bad he was. Seems a few years earlier, this pastor had been the subject of a huge scandal in our little town. 2 of his now grown sons had filed lawsuits against him for forcing intimacy when they were children and were now estranged from their parents. So, feeling smug and vindicated, I emailed the pastor. Yeah, it was a childish thing to do, but frankly, I'm still that same teenager deep down. In the email, I told him who I was and that I knew he was a bad one even when I was a kid and that he's sick in the head and I was right to distrust him. Instead of replying to me directly, he got my dad to tell me off. My dad said he still attends Pastor Bob's services and asked me not to contact the man again. I tried to make my dad see sense, that Pastor Bob is a vile, but he refuses to believe the allegations. My mother, however, stopped going to Pastor Bob's services and now attends another church, although, to this day, she still refuses to discuss the case with me.
Redditors with real-life butterfly effect stories, what happened and what was the series of events and outcomes. I was very little and singing a song completely with made-up words. My mom asked what it was, and I said Evelynese, my name is Evelyn. Then a year later I made up a fake country for that fake language, Evelynese. Then I started making up some stories. Now it's a little over a decade later, I'm in high school, and I have a whole fictional world with 3 political superpowers, that I won't name for personal reasons. But just know Evelynese has a better name now. This world has a very intricate map of ecosystems, and soon, political borders of various eras, 5 distinct cultural and ethnic groups so far, and some unique flora and fauna. Former Evelynese specifically has 20 families of nobility, 237 common families, a religion, a specific type of domesticated big cat, the bones of a con long, 2 epics in the works, the first being adapted from older stories I made up, and much more. I'm probably going to work on this until the day I die, all because toddler me wanted to throw some snark at my mom.
Is living with your family slowly eating away at your sanity too?
Struggling to find happiness in a challenging living situation after a difficult experience with toxic roommates, I, a 27-year-old woman, had no choice but to move back in with my family.
Living with my mother was not ideal, but it was better than staying with my eldest sister and her 2 kids in a chaotic household. Little did I know that moving back would also bring back all the anxieties I had previously worked so hard to overcome. Living in my mother's house feels like being trapped in a dungeon. The familiar feelings of anxiety, judgment, overthinking, and paranoia resurface as soon as I enter this environment. Honest interactions with my family seem impossible due to a breakdown in communication, leaving me feeling tremendously distressed. To make matters worse, we have to witness my sister psychologically and emotionally abusing her children, particularly one who struggles with oppositional defiant disorder and speech delay. The constant emotional turmoil and screaming make the house a chaotic place. When I speak up against this abuse, no one stands beside me, despite silently agreeing. I feel like I'm playing house with a group of hypocrites, and it's challenging to find any positivity in this environment. Being around my family does not bring me happiness. There is a narrative, especially from my eldest sister, that stifles my personal growth. Expressing myself fully is met with hostility, and everyone seems to revolve their behavior around her due to fear. Additionally, my mother is emotionally manipulative, adding another layer of complexity. Meanwhile, I'm expected to cater to their needs like a servant, fulfilling grocery shopping and other requests because I'm a people pleaser. My boyfriend tries to encourage me by emphasizing growth and progress, but it often feels like I've been planted in infertile soil where nothing thrives. My spirit and spark are fading away, and I struggle to find joy. I've realized that I need to protect myself in this toxic environment. Stepping away from escalating conversations is a necessity, but it also leaves me feeling alone in a house full of people. In these moments, I'd rather be completely alone, as being alone while surrounded by others is a painful experience. I avoid meal times and gatherings, especially when my eldest sister is involved, to avoid feeling excluded. The isolation is self-imposed, but it's a necessary measure for my well-being. I find myself on the verge of tears constantly, yet I don't want to be consumed by negativity. Generally, I am a positive person, but this situation is draining the life out of me. My boyfriend is also affected by my mood swings, and I can't help but feel like a terrible person throughout it all. I struggle to find enjoyment in spending time with my family. On top of everything, I recently lost my job, experienced temporary rehiring, and then got fired again, all within the same month. September seems like a distant future, and the thought of enduring countless hardships until then is overwhelming. This is a difficult period in my life, and I truly hate it. However, I hold on to hope that things will improve. I cherish the future plans of moving in with my partner and believe that every challenge I face now will only make me stronger. Candy Crush ended my marriage. Today, for the first time in exactly 10 years, I'm playing Candy Crush, the game that ended my first marriage. It was much deeper than the game, of course, but it was the catalyst that day. My husband, then 21, had me, then 20, completely isolated within months of getting married, had me quit my job of years, took my phone, disabled my car, got physical when I tried to leave, would lock me out on our second-story patio, etc. The next time I tried to leave, I locked myself in our bathroom with my laptop and tried to contact someone to get police help. He got to me anyway. I wasn't allowed to use our laptops anymore after that. So, when he came home early from work on October 3rd, 2013 and caught me using my laptop, he was enraged. I told him I was only playing Candy Crush. He didn't believe me nor check. It wouldn't have mattered. I wasn't allowed to use the computer. I was just hoping the attack would be less severe if he knew I was only playing a game and not talking to anyone. He left after he hurt me long enough for my daughter, then 18 months, and I'd have finally escaped this time. I went to the hospital that night for my injuries. Severe concussion, spinal injury, strangulation marks, contusions head to toe. Literally, they documented bruising on every part of my body from my face and head down to the tops and bottoms of my feet. I also had kidney stones in my right kidney at the time. He made sure not to miss that spot. Police and CPS filed a report and charges the next morning. I filed for divorce and a protection order the next business day. Spent the next 2 years fighting with everything in me for custody of our child so she'd never be alone with the monster who promised to unalive her just to hurt me. He eventually pled guilty in criminal court to several charges that were a joke compared to the crimes. 9 days served in jail. Family court for divorce/custody took a little more than 2 years total. Over 200 motions, 8 full days of trial spread, over a year, and $60,000 in attorney fee debts for me. I won custody, so it was all worth it. He got limited supervised visits with trained DV supervisors because he beat me in front of our daughter regularly, but he never stuck to the schedule and stopped seeing her altogether after 2 years. He hasn't seen her in 5+ years now. My now husband adopted her a couple years ago, so we have no more ties to bio dad/ex-husband. Bio dad did try to fight the adoption, of course, but luck was in our favor that day. I've never been able to stomach the thought of Candy Crush since that day. But today, I decided 10 years is more than enough time to suffer. I'm no longer going to let the fear and trauma hold me back from even the small things. I'm going to play Candy Crush and soothe myself through the hard feelings. I'm safe and loved and happy. He can't get to us anymore. Nearly baby trapped by a family of racists. I used to drink to the point of passing out. I mean blackout intoxicated. I went to a party one night and while I don't remember sleeping with this girl, I woke up naked with her. I exchanged numbers with her and think nothing of it. I get a call a month later that she is pregnant and it is my kid. I went over to her house to talk about it. This is where I find out her dad is the organizer in the Circle Clan Ku Klux and all of her brothers are as well. So as the father of her child, They forced me into becoming a good Christian warrior for the white race and had to attend the meeting. To say these guys were idiots was an understatement. No understanding of history or anything else. It was just a bitch session about other races. I started drinking during the meetings as a way to get through them. During one session I blurt out, if we are concerned about bettering the white race, why the hell are we not helping the white race? The Black Panther Party fed the community, ran its own schools, and created a base to make its race more successful. What the hell are we doing besides dressing up like idiots and bitching about things? The meeting hall exploded and the Grand Poobah or whatever he called himself took notice and held me after the meeting. Truth be told, I was kind of hoping to get a bullet in the back of my head for what I was saying, but it really turned out different. I went on a rant about how morality is a luxury compared to survival. That if you want white people to succeed, you need to not only lead by example but to be employable. Tattoos and looking like a hooligan are not going to get that done. Childcare and the ability to keep people fed is what you need to start doing. After half an hour of back and forth, Grand Poobah understood what I was saying and wanted me to be in a leadership position. I declined, but I said I would think about it. I still attended the meetings, but I was kept quiet as I played with fire and almost got burned. Well, I continued on being the perfect boyfriend, going to and running errands for her until the birth of the child. Well, needless to say, I was not the father. In fact, they went back 8 generations on both sides of my family to make sure I was pure white in order to join. They did the same on her side as well. So when the baby popped out, I was off the hook. This racist family just had a black kid. I had found my exit, but the family was still insisting it was my kid. I was threatened, but I yelled back with some of my newly learned vocabulary. I left the hospital and put in a call to the Grand Poobah, who was interested in what I had to say. He said he would handle it. I got a call a month later from a private number saying that it had been handled and that they would never contact me ever again. I did get a little bit curious about how things were supposedly handled, so I looked her up on the net. I found out that the family died due to carbon monoxide poisoning and the house caught fire with everyone inside. It was ruled an accidental death. I can only speculate, but if I had not made the call, I think that the racist family would have still been alive. I was so hellbent on gaining my freedom that I did not think of the consequences and only thought about my end goal. The only thing I can say is that if I did not make that call, I would have had an accidental death myself. My wife kicked my mother out of my apartment. I am a 27-year-old male and got married to my 28-year-old wife last year. Since the beginning, there have been tensions between my mom and my wife. My mom, a 47-year-old female, raised me alone as a single mother. My dad was an alcoholic and a terrible person. She left him when I was 2, and at that time, she was pregnant with a second child but chose not to have it. So, it has always been just me and her. My mom worked multiple low-wage jobs to raise me and even paid for my college, which used up all her savings. Once I started earning a good income, I bought my first apartment. When I got married, my wife was initially okay with my mom living with us, as the apartment has 3 bedrooms and could easily accommodate her. However, soon after the marriage, my wife began to have issues with my mom living with us. She told me that my mom should move out or she would force her to leave. For the sake of my marriage, I agreed with my wife. I rented a nearby apartment for my mom and somehow convinced her to move there. It was uncomfortable for my mom, who had never lived alone, to adjust to doing everything by herself, but I persuaded her for the sake of my wife's happiness. However, problems arose when my wife got upset about me sending money to my mom for groceries, medicine, other bills, and rent. My mom can't afford to live in my area as it's expensive, and she doesn't have much in the way of savings, so I was supporting her financially. My wife argued that my mom is extended family and that it's wrong for me to fund her life entirely. She said my mom should work and earn her own money because she is still young. Another issue was that my mom, living alone, would call me 2 to 3 times a day. My wife said this was excessive and that my mom should find someone else to call. Even my wife's mom and sister confronted me, saying my mom's toxic attachment and reliance on me for financial support were affecting my relationship. They suggested giving my mom a month's notice to find work or move to a shared living facility on the outskirts if she couldn't afford to live alone. They also said she should limit her calls to me to once a day and that, for emotional support, she should start dating and potentially remarry. Reluctantly, I agreed with my wife. A month later, my mom got evicted from her rental and moved to a shared facility in a shady neighborhood with 3 other women, some of whom have questionable backgrounds. She's doing all this because she doesn't want my marriage to fail. She cried to me over the phone. What should I do? Is my wife right? Is it fair for my wife to prioritize her luxuries and travel plans while my mom suffers? My wife wants my mom to start dating and potentially remarry because she can't live alone due to financial and emotional reasons, but is that realistic for my mom? My 21-year-old brother unalived himself today. My heart breaks for you and your family. I have experienced the loss of too many people to unaliving, 2 being close family. For what it's worth, if I may provide a few of my opinions, talking points, I am sorry if I am blunt or you don't want to read all of this right now, but I hope that any of it might be helpful. Your mom could possibly black out the memory of finding your brother as she likely went into shock. It's the brain's way of protecting itself. This happened to my sister who found our brother, and it's been a long road of continuous recovery through the years since. Thankfully, she has known her boundaries and has hospitalized herself out of harm's way through her own strength. Do this if you need to, as you need to, unapologetically, in any employer who doesn't allow all of the time you need. Be patient with each other's grief and healing processes. Don't be surprised if she, or anyone, has some different coping behaviors come from what happened. Wanting to enforce everyone having their locations on at all times, not wanting any doors to be closed even if using the bathroom, etc., Keep open communications. Unaliving is not contagious, nor is it a crime. I like to stay away from saying committing because they did not do this to hurt anyone on purpose, whether it was premeditated or spontaneous. They truly felt this was their only and last option. It will benefit no one, especially yourself, to keep anything in. Speak about him. Don't let shame from anyone erase his memory of the good years in love. Look for a good therapist, psychiatrist that specializes in unaliving survivors, and don't give up if you don't like the first couple. Push yourself to confront your trauma and encourage everyone to do the same. I hope that you can all heal together instead of bottling things up and hurting alone. Unaliving rates increase for survivors of unaliving, which title does not exist alone for those who did not complete their attempts. Your family and his friends will be experiencing an array of emotions, and guilt will be prominent. Check in on each other. There is pain of losing a loved one, there's a different pain when it's to unaliving, and it's more so difficult when they've been found the way he was. All of you now have a higher risk of harm, so please be aware of that. Most importantly, this is not your fault. It's none of your faults. Say that to yourself often. It's not your fault. I am so sorry, and I am sending all of my love to you all. I put my 2 kids up for adoption because I can't take it anymore. I have 3 kids, 2 with my ex Maggie and 1 with my wife Lily. The kids I have with Maggie, Fred and Stella, are both severely disabled to the point neither of them can function without a caregiver. Fred cannot walk, or even hold items. Stella cannot walk, talk, hold items, or chew on her own food. Both need diaper changing and many other things. I do not love them. I find it hard to love them and connect with them. I read and talked with both kids on their own and with each other for hours ever since they were young. But they showed zero emotion towards me, and when Fred did respond with was just a grumble. Stella is nonverbal. It's not like they were brainless zombies, but they just never showed emotion towards me and only me. When my wife or my parents would talk, they would show some sort of emotion and would even smile at times. My ex Maggie left me and the kids for another man when Stella was 1 and had cut all contact with me and most of my family. I tried to take her to court for child support, but I lost. I met my now wife, Lily, when Fred was 6 and Stella was 3. We got married, and a few years later she had my second son, Todd. Lily was great. She helped me take care of Fred and Stella even when I told her she did not need to. I could not take care of them any longer. I cannot financially aid them and do not love them like they are my kids. I barely get to spend time with Todd, and this has affected my relationship with Fred and Stella to the point where I try to ignore their cries, but I wasn't able to. I put them into a home. Lily understands and supports my choice, but my family has shamed me and some have cut contact with me. I tried to tell them my reasons, but they would not listen. Now Maggie is getting involved after 9 years of ignoring me and her children. After my little sister had told her, I do not know how to handle this, and she has threatened to take me to court over this. I do not regret my actions, or do I feel sorry for what I did. I would love to keep Fred and Stella around, but it's taking a toll on my well-being as well as my family's. They didn't show any emotion or interest in me when I did talk and spend time with them. They would react more to cartoons than me. I missed a lot of milestones for Todd because of his older siblings. I missed his first steps, word, and even his birth. I will dearly miss Fred and Stella, but it's what's best for them both and me. AITA for wanting my wife to stay up during a road trip and talk to me. I'm writing this right now at the hotel where I'm at because I'm genuinely at a loss of words. I don't think I'm in the wrong, but at the same time, she looks really pissed at me. My wife, me, and our 2-year-old are going on our first family road trip to California. We rotate driving in shifts, but the problem is that when I was driving, my shift fell during the night, and so I was feeling really lonely and bored as I was driving. I'm not someone who can be left to his own thoughts very well, and I need people around me. I thrive on energy and excitement. My wife is a bit of the opposite. She's generally fine with being left alone and can sit quietly for hours and hours upon end. The problem is that around 11 p.m., I was driving and my wife and our son were in the backseat. I was feeling isolated, so I shook her awake, but then our son woke up, and well, you can probably guess what happens next. Once he quieted down, my wife began to quietly blow up at me about how much of a dick I was being. I told her that it wasn't fair for her to just sleep like that, and it made me feel like a driver. She then said that she doesn't force me to stay awake or engage with her, but I told her that that's a cheap blow because we're not the same people, and I kept my mouth shut while she was driving because I know she doesn't like distractions, even though it bothered me terribly, so the least she could do is to stop being selfish and help keep me sane. Despite my perfectly logical answer, she apparently got emotional, and then started screaming some shit about how raising one toddler is hard enough, and that she didn't know there was another one in the car who needed his whims catered to at every moment, and at that point, since she got rude, I decided to disengage. Now our whole trip is falling apart and she's making me out to be the bad guy. At this point I was cut off completely. I found myself in a long dark road of depression and pain. It was like my son died, the lowest point of my life. But one day I woke up and was just done. I rebounded and have since moved on. I met my wife and we have 2 beautiful kids. Life was great again. Until about a year ago, when I got email from my son. He apologized for everything, that he recently got a child and started reflecting and realized how horrible he was to me. He wanted to reconnect and be in my life again. There was much more in email, but I don't want to share for privacy reasons. I didn't feel anything when I read this mail. I didn't respond. Since then, he sent about 15 emails detailing what is happening in his life and his kid. I never responded, but I figured I at least owe him some kind of closure. I didn't send it yet. It goes, "Dear son, I would appreciate it if you stopped sending me emails. I went through hell and back to be at this point in my life. I have a family again, and I'm very happy right now. I understand you have regrets and some guilt about the past, but I hold no resentment towards you and I forgive you. Bringing you back into my life would introduce complications I am not willing to face for my own good and that of my family. I simply cannot give you what you seek. I want no further contact. I hope you understand and wish you all the best in your life. Goodbye, Up. I didn't send it yet and finally told my wife what is happening. She read all the emails in my draft and was horrified. She begged me to not send it and open my heart for him. We argued and a demand for therapist came up. She even told my parents, and my mom went nuclear. She started berating me like I was a little kid again. I don't know why she doesn't understand. She was with me all this time and saw what I went through. In the end, she told me if I did this to him, she will do the same to me. I was speechless. I don't even know what I seek here. I went through similar stories here, and a lot of the comments were not nice to people in my position. I don't know. Maybe I am a prick and need to hear it.
What did a teacher do that made you automatically gain respect for them? I had a teacher in elementary school who was prone to outbursts. He had a short fuse, at least compared to every other adult I knew at the time. For instance, when several of us in class weren't listening, he'd throw a piece of chalk against the wall to get our attention. Honestly, we just thought he was crazy. A year or maybe 2 years later, the school had a talent show, like a big one in the gym in front of everyone. One of my classmates was really into music and wanted to play a drum solo. Our teacher had mentioned offhand that he used to be in a band and played drums, so my classmate asked him, sort of dared like kids often do with adults, to play a solo in front of the school, and he did. He effing rocked it. But that's not what made me respect him. Turns out the band he played for was a very successful and at the time quite popular rock band. He left just before they became popular because he wanted to be a teacher. He chose teaching kids over the chance at fame and fortune and didn't regret it.